I'd like to call this special city council meeting to order, November 25th. Would you please call the roll?
Finnegan.
Here.
Gas.
Here.
Flora.
Here.
Matani.
Here.
Zingy.
Here.
Coos.
Here.
Kistler.
Here.
Severson.
Here, please rise for the pledge of allegiance. Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. The Ketchikan City Council would like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional first people of the land of Ketchikan, the Tongass Tlingit tribes. Do we have any communications at this particular point in time?
We have
One lay on the table, right,
a budget.
for a budget update.
Mm-hmm.
I think everybody has received that. It's update one, position vacancy report for general government, Ketchikan Public Utilities, no action is required. We have persons to be heard.
We do. Eric.
Evening, Eric.
You want to state your full name?
Good evening. Eric Rich, 228 Martin Street.
Okay. Sure.
I think you can hear me.
Oh.
I want to address the city's plan to demolish the Martin Street stairway. It's a really bad idea for several reasons. And I probably should have contacted you before this. I'm a little late and I hope it's not too late. Anyway, these stairs have been there at least since I first walked them after arriving in Ketchikan in 1962. And likely long before that, because at that time they connected the previous farmhouse on Garden Lane to the milk house and the cow barn down on the Hunt Street right away, which was part of a discontinued dairy operation. The stairway was rebuilt by the city about 1982. As far as I can tell, it's still sound and safe. I walk it quite often. I live at 228 Martin Street at the top of the stairway. The 200 block of Martin consists of the stairway and about 200 feet of trail leading up to the Martin Garden Lane Tower Road intersection, the uppermost part of which is a roadway that I use for access to my house. I have been there since I built the house in 1970 and have done most of the snow shoveling on those stairs in all those years. Both winter and summer, I see people using the trail and stairs morning and night. It serves foot traffic in the entire Carolina neighborhood west of Hennigan Street, Garden Lane, and Hill Road. People use it to get to the A&P and other businesses in that area for both work and shopping, and also to and from the Viger shipyard. And children use it to access the school bus stop at Barton and Tongass. I also see them using the stairway to go swimming and fishing in Carolina Creek in the summertime. Without those stairs, I would have to go up from my house to Garden Lane, up Garden Lane to Hillside, and then down Hillside and Hetwood to the stores instead of going directly up and down by way of Martin Street. We should not be allowing our infrastructure to deteriorate so as to make people even more car dependent. Instead, the best plan would be to improve the trail between the stairway and the road so that it is more easily cleared of snow. And also, by the way, to improve the Tower Road trail between Hillside and Alaska Avenue to allow easier foot traffic from the upper neighborhood to the shopping center. And I'm not sure what kind of maintenance the city does on the stairs. It does require brush trimming and such on a fairly regular basis. And there's also a certain amount of garbage that gets heaved off the stairs, especially in that middle landing, that has to get cleaned up now. Then Our family used to do that every year. I haven't been so keen on it since we get a little old to climb up and down the cliffs. But I think we really need to keep that stairway in place.
Thank you, Eric. Anybody have any questions? Appreciate your time.
Thank you.
That's the only person that signed up to speak, Your Honor.
Thank you. With that, we will close persons to be heard and move on to new business, resolution number 242945, adopting the budget for the year 2025 and appropriating from the general government funds for the fiscal year 2025. Do I have a motion, please?
Your Honor, I move the City Council approve resolution number 24-2945, adopting the budget for the year 2025, appropriating from the general government funds for the fiscal year 2025, and establishing an effective date.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Delilah, what do you have?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So what we'll do is do a very brief overview of general government as a whole. And I know council members have lots of questions, but we'll really dive in as we go department by department. For this evening, we actually have our Public Works Division. That's one of the biggest general fund divisions, and so we're going to cover them tonight. So if the mayor will allow, we'll kick it off with our PowerPoint.
Good.
All right. Next slide, Lacey. This is just our schedule and calendar for public notice. Next slide. What we're going to do tonight is just a basic review of general government, highlight any non-compliance with budget policy. So as you'll recall, on August 1st, when we had a regular council meeting, our council gave us priorities for the budget setting. So we first talked about the 5% soft cap pursuant to our budget policy. The other request was to limit FTE increases and to have no increases if possible. The other is fund balance compliance. That means that we are maintaining fund balances to meet our debt obligations as well as our own policy. And the last one was to address critical capital infrastructure needs. I will tell you, this budget does not do that completely. We just don't have enough money in the Public Works Sales Tax Fund. So I cut, the department heads did a great job. They listed all their critical capital, but I don't have any money to go towards it. So what we did is we focused on the highest need priorities and went from there. This will just be a high level review. And then once we get through this portion, we'll start rolling into individual department budgets, and those department heads will be here to address any questions. So we'll start with an overview for each department, and then the council, of course, if you have any questions. Next slide. Oh, fund balances. Again, I know council members, you already know this, but this is for your information and for your record. What our policy says, our budget policy as well as our fund balance policy of what we should be maintaining. For the most part, it's between 3 to 6 months of reserves. And so what that means is if it takes us $1 million in 1 year to operate, then we should have in reserves 25% of that. And so our reserves, if we had a $1 million operating budget, our reserves should always be $250,000. And 25% is pretty typical. The port fund, I know we have more because of our operational cycle. Because in the port, there's only one season for us to collect that revenue. It doesn't go year round. Next slide. So let's talk taxation. This is policy section number 6. There are no proposed increases to property tax rates for FY25. I will tell you, we've heard from the borough that they're anticipating a 5% taxable valuation increase. That means that they expect taxable value within the city of Ketchikan to increase by 5%. Thus, that has been programmed into our budget. So we are not going to increase the actual mill levy or mill rate. We're going to leave it flat. Additionally, we have no proposed increases to sales tax rates for FY 2025. Right now, our current rate sets at 5.5% for the April through September portion of the year, and then 3% from October to March. Keep in mind, this does not include the borough sales tax rate. This is just the city's tax rate. So we always hear back from people saying, all right, you lowered the tax rate, but that's not happening. It's only because we don't include the borough's tax rate for our discussion. I found it incredibly interesting now that we've gone through a whole year of seasonal sales tax. So remember, FY23 We had a few months of additional tax because seasonal didn't kick in until later. So we anticipated we'd see a flat revenue this year. 73% of our entire sales tax collection revenue happens between April and September. So your seasonal sales tax, to take advantage of our cruise and tourism people visiting during the season, really is making a difference to the city. So that means October through March, when it drops back down to 3%, we're only deriving 27% of our revenues in that season. So it did work. That was the plan, and it did work. We also are not proposing any increases to the marijuana sales tax. I will tell you, we have programmed declining funds in the humanitarian grant fund because we are not expecting additional revenue in the marijuana sales tax fund. We're actually seeing declined revenues and declined sales for that. We are not Colorado or Texas or any of those, no, not Texas, Mexico benefits from Texas, where we have neighboring states coming in to purchase cannabis, and then we take advantage of that. And that's what Colorado has experienced, that's what Texas experienced, that's what California experienced with legalization. We only sell to ourselves in our own island. So there's no visitor impact or people crossing into Ketchikan to come buy cannabis. So we are actually seeing declining sales. In addition to that, more shops are opening up in the borough. We have a limit to just 2 in the city. So there is no potential for growth in the city. So if you want to open a sales for cannabis, you would go out in the borough. We're at our maximum. Our community grant funds, however, are based on sales tax. Therefore, we have programmed a 5% increase, which is pursuant to our fund policy. Just like every other department, if we kept them to the 5% cap. Next slide. If you look at our sales tax revenue, 2023, we had a higher than usual sales tax revenue only because January, February, March, we were still at the 5.5% or 5% sales tax rate. Then we shifted into seasonal, and when we came into 2024, it dropped down. January, February, March went from 5 down to 3. So we knew we were going to have a bump in 2023 when we made the shift. We budgeted 2024 anticipating that, and we pretty much kind of hit our target. We thought we were being somewhat conservative.
We are still waiting for October, which is our biggest quarter. So we're waiting for October's submissions to come this month, and they're really late. So I expected them last week, so I've gotten them, but so
because we didn't get that, we don't know what October, that last quarter looks like. That's the big one, June, July, August. We budgeted 2025 as flat. And it could come back more. We could see that, but we really don't know. And if we do, we can come back to council.
Yeah.
Next slide. Our special revenue fund rates, our Orphanage and Port revenue rates are programmed at the same FY24 amount, not the rates, I'm sorry, I meant to say the visitors of 1.12 million visitors. The wharfage rates will increase by $2 for FY25. We already know that's in effect. Our CPV fund transfers to fire and police have remained the same as FY24. However, keep in mind, we could be coming to change that once we fully analyze the cruise impact study. So we've left our transfers the same in this calendar year. Even after the budget's approved, it's entirely possible we'll be coming back to you to take more out of wharfage fees and hit the general fund less. We didn't program it in the budget because of timing, but that is a possibility. In addition to that, we are loading the port data into our new revenue rate engine. I know that's not on the slide, but I did want to let you know that we finally have the P&D report that we've been talking about on cathodic protection. I think Craig mentioned a lot to you as far as working on the promenade, what we need for cathodic protection. He mentioned his $30 million that they need worth of work. All those items, now that we have the report, are being programmed into the rate engine. So we can apply it and recommend to council, this is what we really need rates to be in order to run the port. So we just reached out to start that process last week. Next slide. Harbor rates. Our harbor rates programmed for the new rate year 2 implementation. If council will recall, we approved harbor rates for 2024 and 2025 in our ordinance. You'll also recall our consultant, when going through the harbor rates, recommended a 17% increase. That was not gonna happen. That's not something we could do to our community. It was gonna be considered a rate shock situation. What we've done is we budget in the capital, we budget in the very slight increase in revenue based on the changes. And even though we're planning for 2025's rate increase to increase our revenues, they are not projected to cover the increase in operational costs. So the Harbor Import and Harbor share a maintenance building that's in need of replacement. I think some of you have actually toured it, and I think you would agree it needs replacement. It's in dire need. So what we've programmed into the harbor, which we didn't anticipate when we did that first rate study, was a interfund loan. So in other words, we'd like the port to pay for the entire building. The harbor will borrow from the port its portion, and then we'll have to program in a repayment to the port fund. So you can't use the port fund to support the harbors because they're supposed to be separate enterprises. However, we could loan money. So there is going to be a debt service of approximately $103,000 that was not part of the original rate study. So in order to build that $5 million, no, it wasn't $5. $1.5 million. Thinking of a different building. For that $1.5 million, we programmed a loan from from the port to the harbor in order to effectuate that building. So that wasn't factored in. Thus, you'll see we'll probably have a shortfall of about $262,000, and we'll have to hit the harbor reserves. We did note when we went through the rate study in 2024, it would not be sufficient, but we did want to give it more of a slow trot to increasing those rates. In addition to the port fund going into the rate engine, the harbor data is being loaded also. So we'll have a more long-term plan, and we don't have to hire a consultant again to do another rate study. We'll load the data into the rate engine, and then we'll be able to make projections. But that conversation will be coming down the pike, just so council is aware. We already know the harbor fund the harbor revenues are not sufficient for operations, and so that will be coming down the pike. The bottom line is we have years-long waiting lists. We did not experience what others warned us, that people were just going to leave our harbors to find harbor somewhere else. Our wait list is just as long. We've not seen many change with that. Next slide. Solid waste. Solid waste rates are programmed as flat for FY25, but we did tell council in December of last year that we will have to consider some changes in order to meet our deferred capital needs, but more importantly, the ADEC permitting directives. So we are programming this year a use of the solid waste fund balance of about $500,000. We can adjust the rates pursuant to our shipping rates. So when that contract comes in, that's already a pass through to the customer. The council approved that several years ago. I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, 2020. That whenever our shipping contract increased, we automatically increase the rates to follow that. So that part's done. However, we do know, and it's the same number as last year, we need about a 24% rate increase overall in solid waste. So we're not proposing any rate increases in this budget. We're only proposing use of reserves. But I want to give you a heads up that once we get everything into the rate engine, it's likely going to come back to do a 6% increase every year for the next 3 years. I don't want to commit to that right now because we want to bring data to the council. Next slide. More good news in wastewater. We've programmed those as flat for FY25, but because we've done so, we're going to use a fund balance reserve of about $2 million. That doesn't really knock down the fund too much. I mean, we can afford it. However, we're getting to that point where we're going to start violating our fund balance policy. These are all that critical capital infrastructure that the council asked about. So I couldn't cut it. I cut a lot in many areas. This one really is critical, and we'll talk about it more when we get to the wastewater section of our budget. This also, I'm assuming we're going to need probably a 5% rate increase over the next 3 years in wastewater. Again, we're loading it into the rate engine for future discussions with council. For now, we're using reserves. Next slide. Our next section, policy, section 5, is debt. Our annual debt service, we project it to remain pretty much the same as 2024, except for 2 new loans. The first is the interfund loan to the harbor department from the port department, and that's the one I just talked about. We're programming in about $100,000 annually to pay that back. Of course, we could extend that debt repayment cycle if we needed to. We're also expecting our ADEC loans for wastewater improvements, and those payments will be about $175,000 a year. This is for Water Street, which we need to rehab ahead of the DOT project. So again, it was one of those, yes, it's critical, but we also need to do it before the DOT starts their rehab of Water Street. We want to get our stuff taken care of. Next slide. Technology investment in public art. This is a policy section 7 that will commit at least 1.5% of our September sales tax revenue. And we have programmed that into the IT CIP rather than setting up a separate fund. And that the IT needs already meet that policy section. In addition, we have not yet established the public arts program. We will have funds in it by the end of FY24, and we have programmed in those projects in FY25. So essentially what happens is if I have $1 million project, my budget, you'll see it in the CIP, it'll say demobilization, concrete, contractor, construction, planning, and then there will be a 1% for the arts cost within the CIP. So you'll see it as a line item of that project. We didn't program any spending of the art fund because we want to have the policy vetted and approved by council before we spend any money out of it. I know we have lots of ideas, but we want to make sure that it's well done and responsible with our taxpayer funds. Next slide. Policy section 8 addresses growth limitation. That's where we have our 5% soft cap. Right now, the current rate of inflation is 2.4%. with an additional 1.8% projected in 2025. So that soft cap is really sufficient to keep up with inflation. The item that it does not keep up with, because we exclude personnel from the soft cap, is our collective bargaining agreement COLAs. We are currently in negotiations with IBEW for general government CBAs. I don't know what that looks like. I know Lacey, the team has just received the initial ask from the union, and finance will be preparing that for council executive session, what those initial asks look like. Therefore, we didn't program anything in. Next slide. Oh, there it is. Wage and benefit increases. We have estimated, I think, was it 2%? 3%? We estimated a small percentage. Well, not small. I think it's significant. A 3% wage increase. We don't know what the CBAs are going to ask for, but we have that estimated. Overtime has increased through the entire organization, and if you'll recall, last year council our policy to pay overtime at a daily rate rather than a weekly calculation. In addition to that, we are anticipating a 10% increase of our health insurance. That amounts to about $414,000. We're also anticipating workers' compensation to increase by 10% or $36,000. We did see a decrease in FY24. So it wasn't as high as an expense that we budgeted because our modifier went down. And our modifier, we don't get it until halfway through the year. So we don't know what the modifier is going to be until we're halfway through the fiscal year. We did budget a 10% increase, however. Unfortunately, as you know, we did have a death while on duty, and that does impact our modifier. So we're anticipating an increase because of that. Next slide. We are going to see some interdepartmental charges increasing by about $600,000. This is significant because we've shifted share service allocations to the port and then correctly reflected work of the customer service and sales manager over in KPU. So you'll actually see in the manager's budget a 0.25 request for an FTE increase. That's not an increase of an actual person. That's accounting for all of Kim Simpson's time, effort, and everything she does on behalf of general government. So what we're doing right now in today's world, we're incorrectly charging our KPU ratepayers for her services. And so Kim's been acting as our PIO and doing work for general government as well as her staff. I think the reflection is closer to 30% of general government work that they do at customer service and marketing, but we programmed it as 25% for this budget. The bottom line is we are seeing some shifts of IT and HR. We are going to hit the port fund. You're seeing increases, but we're going to hit the port fund a little harder because we weren't charging them for the work that HR Finance does to bring on those 50 part-time and temporary staff members each summer. So we've shifted some of those allocations. Insurance premiums, I could not keep those at 5%. Our liability insurance increased by 17%, property increased by 5%. Auto was only 3%, and our internal claims increased by 6%. Keep in mind, though, we are anticipating some expenses that were related to the land side, and we might be able to recover those. I do want to mention you will see some projects as we go through each department and division related to Second Street rehab and some of the work that we have to do. We have to spend that money before we're qualified to be reimbursed. And so it's in our budget. Once we get our work orders from FEMA, and we know we can be reimbursed for them, then we can program that revenue to offset it. But for now, we have to program it into expenses. We don't have the official answer from FEMA of yes, you qualify. We still have to have that meeting with their assessors, but we still need to get the work done. So we've gone ahead and programmed in the budget. We're assuming that we're going to be reimbursed. However, I cannot in good conscience program that into that revenue into the budget until I have those contracts in hand. Once we do, we can come back to council and say, hey, we're saving money. We're going to be able to get reimbursed on FEMA. But for now, programming for the work and not for the reimbursement. Next slide. Our key changes for insurance are on this slide. The blue line is the most notable. You'll see it's a big jump. That is our property insurance cost. Property insurance cost is jumping because of replacement value. And the cost of construction is going up. If we went to depreciation value on our insurance coverage, we would save a ton of money on premiums, but then we'd be in the same situation as the American Legion, as the South Tongass Fire Station. We have a loss of a building, and then we have this huge liability that we can't afford to replace. And so we have erred on replacement value and not book or depreciation value because of that coverage. If something happens to our building, we want to be covered. And that's just... We don't want to be in those situations where we're having to come up with a deficit. Liability increases, that's the grade line. It's had a big jump too. That's been nationwide. Government and liability insurance is getting tougher and tougher to obtain, particularly in the reinsurance market. So even though we don't have situations with the place that I came for just settled $20 million for a police shooting. That was one of the highest settlements I've seen in a while. We didn't do anything wrong, but that $20 million and other such settlements have a ripple effect through the entire industry, and then we pay for it. The same as the property. We're going to see, because of the hurricane, we've estimated a big increase, but because of all the hurricanes that happen throughout the country, insurance companies are trying to recover their bottom line. It has nothing to do with Ketchikan. It has nothing to do with we're hurricane happy or landslide free or anything else. It's that company making money and trying to recover their losses throughout the country. So we're seeing that, especially in municipal insurance. So we've seen a lot of big lawsuit settlements on the police side, which is what accounts for your liability increases. Even though we're good, we haven't done anything. It could be a lot. If we were a bad actor like some of the agencies in the lower 48, that would be a different story. I know some municipalities who cannot get insurance. They have to actually, there's one county or city that I know of, they actually have a property tax to cover their own self-insurance pool because they can't get coverage anywhere else. So we're not in that situation, but nationwide it is increasing and will exceed that 5%. Next slide. This is just our insurance policy breakdown. It's, as you can see, property, it's the big gray line, the big tall one. That's really our biggest one, followed by liability. And so it just gives you a good idea of where we are on our insurances. So it's pretty standard year over year. Next slide. These are our insurance expense trends. Again, this is for our premium payment. This is not what we're paying out. That's our claims fund, but obviously it's not trending downwards. So it's just good information to have of where we're trending. Next slide. Same with Wharfage Marine and Auto. Wharfage and Marine, we've seen a really big increase in that. But keep in mind what's happened in the rest of the country when hurricanes hit and other issues with seawalls and things like that. So we are seeing a big increase there. Next slide. Workers' compensation, we've actually, considering the market and where we are, I think we're doing pretty darn good. And that's because of our modifier. Workers' comp has gone up again everywhere based on claims. And then the next one is claims. Those are our internal payout claims. Those are the things where maybe our garbage truck has knocked somebody's side mirror off or things like that. That's where that sits. So we did program a little bit of an increase. We've got a few outstanding claims, particularly with the landslide. But again, if we qualify for reimbursement through FEMA, we'll see that later into the calendar year. All right, next slide. Next is our staff cost increases. What we did is we assumed the PERS employer contribution rate will remain flat at 22%. I have not heard anything from our lobbyist or anyone else in the legislature that they're planning to do anything with that in order to recover more. It sounds like we're staying at 22%. We've also programmed in the budget the anticipated step increases related to annual service evaluations. A typical step increase is 1.5%. We've also programmed longevity pay pursuant to council policy. So those are included in the budget. Next slide. This is the one I have a little red X in some of the departments because we are seeing some FTE increases. The first one, it's a total of 4.35 requests. And I understand there are things that maybe we won't be able to do, and department heads will be here to talk about why they want those requests. We're looking at a 0.5 for the HR department. What we've done is we've taken our safety specialist and pretty much split that job into safety and HR generalist. And because of that, we've actually lost development of our safety program. Granted, we do have a great safety culture here and every division is handling that very, very well, and Russ is doing a great job as a new employee. But we would appreciate that, that new funding. The finance department has also requested 1 FTE to help with purchasing, and Michelle will be able to explain that when we get to her budget. The fire department position, this is sort of like the 0.25 up above. This is the inspector position that we had funded last year, but we only funded it for half the fiscal year. So this next 0.5 is completing that to make it a full-time position. The library has requested 0.1, and that's only to increase the outreach librarian's time. And the reason for that is we're seeing more homebound and senior citizens requesting services, and she can't get to them all under our current hours that we allot per position. There is an FTE for Public Works Engineering Division, and what this is we had defunded our, I think, engineering tech position in order to pay for an admin assistant to help out in inspections, which has been a tremendous help. So we would like to fund that engineering division position back again. I'll be honest with you, I think we can just leave it the way it is, and it's going to take us some time to hire people into those engineering positions, but we would like to keep the FTE there. And then finally, our port department has requested an FTE to help with the port operations coordinator, sort of a assistant coordinator, and Craig will be able to talk more about that, but essentially he has 0 backup. He has Craig, maintenance guys, and then port security guys. I will let you know when it comes to staffing, our port and harbors has some of the smallest staffs in the state, even though we have bigger ports and more demand. Next slide. Our council directed staff to address critical infrastructure. As I mentioned before, I cut a lot of capital requests during the initial budget review, and that's only because I don't have enough of the public works sales tax fund. So department heads will probably come to you and say, we really need to have this back, but the money's just not there. In addition, the rolling stock replacements will appear in the CIPs with their funding source when those departments come back to you. Next slide. Vacancies and budget savings. As you know, from the late on the table report that we gave you on vacancies, we almost always have vacancies. If we were to hire every single position today, I guarantee we'll have the same number of vacancies probably within the next 3 months, just because we churn through staff, and that's okay. We've seen a lot of promotions, people moving. That's just the nature of our business. Michelle, did you do a calculation? Okay, can you talk about that a little bit? Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
The current, based on the list that was provided in the budget update, there's approximately 3.5 million in 2024 savings, for vacant positions that have been vacant for the whole year. And then there were a couple positions that were only partially vacant. So, of that 3.4 million, 2.165 million is mostly electric. And then 1.3 million is 4 different departments in general government. And then if those stay vacant in 2025, it would generate 4.3 million in savings. 2.6 of that is electric.
Yeah, mostly electric.
Yeah. Yep. We didn't have any other, the telecom was placed out.
So we do recognize we have anticipated rolling vacancies, and we do have vacancy and salary expense avoidance. What we've done most years, very rarely will we come to you. I know we have in some projects asked for use of that salary savings in others, but we very much try not to do that. I tell department heads to find their money somewhere else before we go after salary savings, because it comes back to our fund balances. And 2, I don't want them using them like, well, I'm gonna hold a position, and I've had this, I've never had it happen here, but I have had departments before saying, well, I'm not gonna hire that position for 6 months because then I'm gonna have some money left over to buy something else. And so that is not something that I allow, to use it as a savings. And so that's why we bring your salary transfers to council. So we don't do that very often. Our budget policy tells us we have to budget the salary of a vacant position at the highest step and highest benefit options. So we do over budget for vacant positions. We budget at step U, full family plan of insurance, full retirement. We go as high as possible. We don't hire people at step U with a full family plan and whatnot, but our policy tells us we have to budget at the highest anticipated expense. So that's what we do. We did go through positions. I have talked to department heads. There are no positions that we've identified as unnecessary. There are some that we may have to reclassify in FY25 only because it's almost impossible to find people to fill them. So for example, I'll give you our water department. We have 2 water operator positions that will be coming open. We're not going to find 2 level 1 or level 2 water operators. Those are both going to have to be reclassified to apprentices. We're still going to budget at the highest need because that's what we need as a water operator, but there's no way we're going to fill it. Unless, I mean, we could get a unicorn that moves to Ketchikan and wants to be a water operator. I keep trying to convince people, but it's not happening because they're in huge demand. They really are. I know one gentleman who is, he actually left his municipal position and is working as a water operator for, I think, like 8 different mutual domestic water companies. And he's making 4 times more money. So he's just a consultant. They're all working under his license as a water operator, and he just goes once a month to their divisions and supervises and oversees. So it's a huge demand out there. Next slide. This is my favorite one because it has all the arrows. Essentially, what we're seeing in this slide is just our general government ad line. So essentially for 2025, we have $179 million, almost $180 million available for use. We project our total revenues at about $95.8 million, which is an increase of $7.25 million over 2024. We have appropriations as $116 million, which is $18 million more than 2024. We also have operating expenditures increasing by $3 million. That is our wages and benefits. That's the biggest impact. That's 6.7%. Remember, I think it's 53% or 51% of our budget is personnel. It's over 50%. And so anytime our wages and benefits go up, that's going to be a huge impact on us. We do have big capital increases, $9.36 million of an increase Keep in mind that it addresses the critical infrastructure mandate, a lot of its rollovers. I mentioned to you, I did not budget anticipated FEMA reimbursements. We do have transfers to other funds increasing by 5.7 million, 79 million. But what I really want to point out is the 2025 budget requires a $20 million drawdown of our government reserves. However, we anticipated we were going to have a $10 million drawdown in 2024. That won't materialize. We couldn't get the projects done. I'll be honest, the landslide hit all of us in our workload. We just couldn't get things out. I did delay some projects because I didn't know if we would get a state, federal disaster declaration. So I was holding on to money. So now we're starting to spend for the end of the year. But I can tell you that, what I want to point is that very bottom line where it says estimated ending estimated ending reserves, December 31st. In 2023, our ending reserves was 76 million. In 2024, we thought we were going to draw down and it would be about 55 million. It's really going to be closer to 84 million. And then for 2025, we anticipate that will go down to 63 million. So we're still healthy. And keep in mind that we typically only spend 88 to 90% of our budget. So even though it looks like a lot, because we have salary savings, because we budget conservatively, we underestimate our revenues, we overestimate our expenses. We do never actually draw down that much money. So Lacey, if you can go to the next slide. So this is just repeats what the budget policy says. Revenues are conservatively estimated and do not assume growth rates in excess of inflation. And expenditures are budgeted at least 100% of historical or anticipated costs. At least. So that means we budget at full cost. Historically, we only spend 88 to 92% of budget. Assuming we were to spend 95% of the FY25 budget, only 95%, that's a $6 million savings. I can tell you there's no way we're going to spend more than that of our budget. We just can't do it. We can't hire fast enough. We can't get projects out fast enough. And we have tons of delays when it comes to project work. I will tell you for public works, we will likely have to rely a lot on vendors because we don't have the engineering staff anymore. That's a big hit to us. Next slide. Okay, so that was the general fund overview. Let's just talk about our fund balance quickly. These are the exceptions to policy. This was the council directive to have compliance with fund balance policies. So for general fund, our requirements are between 7.8 and 7.9 million. We're anticipating starting at 9 million and then ending around 6 or 7 million. So we are going to draw $3 million of our reserves. But I don't think we're actually going to hit that. I would be shocked if we spent more than 9%. Next slide. For the solid waste fund, we're going to be drawing that down beyond our minimum fund balance. We'll have to use 687,000 of our reserves for FY25. We are going to start the fund balance with 1.7 million. We thought we would end the year with 1.2, but it'll be likely more like 1.7 because again, we don't spend our budget to 100%. And I've already mentioned a rate increase is going to be recommended by staff when we get to calendar year 2025 because we can't let it go beyond 1 year for sure. Next slide. In the harbor fund, we've talked about that. We're probably going to use about 263,000 of reserves. We are going to start our balance at 1 million. We thought we'd start at 600,000, but the rate increases helped and the fact that we couldn't get a project out. Again, rate increases are going to be explored for calendar year 2025 for an FY26 recommendation. And then the last one is our wastewater fund. I mentioned again, we're looking at least 5% per year to make up for our wastewater. We have huge capital outlay for FY25 that has to do with the Water Street project, that has to do with some of our ADEC compliance measures. We'll talk a little bit about it more, but again, we're probably, when it comes to CDAs, and depending on what we negotiate, as well as our environmental department compliance costs, we are going to have to explore rate increases in FY '25 for FY '26. All right, so that's it. For general fund, and like I said, that's just a very quick, brief overview. And whenever you're ready, Mr. Mayor, we can start with Public Works.
Does anybody have any questions about the transmittals themselves? Yes, Jay.
Just for information, when we draw down from reserves, will we be in compliance of our policy?
We will of our debt policies, but not our own policy. So in other words, we're meeting our bond covenant requirements. Like last year, we weren't meeting a lot of our bond covenant requirements. We had to raise rates in certain areas. This year, we're doing all right in that end, but we're not meeting our own fund policy, which is why we have to address it in '25.
So what would the difference be? How much would be in deficit for that?
If we continue or?
Yeah.
If you wanted to look at C1 page, there's a calculation for the 25%, what the required balance related to our policy. 25% were, remember?
Oh, it's in the budget overview tab.
So C1 will show you the general fund isn't in compliance and the balance we need, as well as solid waste, harbor, and wastewater.
What page number is that?
C1 under budget overview and.
Okay.
And essentially, in those accounts that I pointed out, wastewater, solid waste, harbors, and general fund. Not so much general fund. I'm not too worried about general fund, I'll be honest. Those other three, we will have to discuss something in '25 or '26. So we can afford to hit the reserves this year, but we can't continue. Can't do that every year.
And I would just add that, part of what you're seeing right now, all three of those funds, they're doing the same thing. We had wage increases, 2021 to 2024 contract. There weren't any rate increases for any of those departments for those wage increases. Same thing, 2024, then, am I off a year? I'm off.
For which?
For
The CBA.
For the
CBA,
CBA.
it expires this year, so.
It's 2021 to 24. And then when you program in another increase possibly for the next CBA, obviously if we're not keeping up with the last two CBAs, then we're not going to keep up with the next one. So that's really what you're seeing there, is we haven't increased rates for the harbor, of course we did last year, and that's where we're starting, right? With a 2, they were projecting a 3-year, needing to do a 3-year. With solid waste, that's what we're looking at. We're needing to, I mean, you could do it all in 1 year, but I sense that that is not where the council would want to go. You'd want to spread it out over a few years. So 3 years at a lower rate can help us get there. Because without increasing rates for PBA, we've increased rates for the solid waste disposal contract, but not the wages. And that's another big chunk of our costs in those divisions. So same thing with wastewater. We haven't increased the rates for the CBA. We increased in August of 2024 only to cover the debt service payment coming for the Water Street loan. So I just wanted to point that out. You're seeing those and you're hearing that message, and you're hearing it from Manager Walsh. Well, where that's coming from is we've increased wages, but not the rates. So I just wanted to point that out.
Dick?
Yeah, we might as well start this. I don't know where you come up with a public art policy yet. But I've got higher priorities in public art coming out of solid waste, fire department, wastewater. So you're gonna have to help me out, because otherwise I'm not gonna support any of it.
That is in our, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Coos, it's in the budget policy. The 1%.
I mean, the budget policy will fix it.
Please admit, just, you can make an agenda request. That's what,
It's requested.
Oh,
There's two of it.
I will second.
okay, well, if you all will work through Kim for your form. I think that Kim can.
We don't have access to forms. They have to be sent to us. I don't have a blank copy.
Yeah.
So that's a problem.
Good. You all, okay, come
From
and
an
send them
email.
out, so, from your email, but I will send them out.
Please do.
Okay.
Yeah, please, if you could please remit that to the clerk's office, absolutely. You can bring that back to our regular council meeting.
Yes, Dick.
Got another question too, and we haven't got into this enough to dig into it, but it seems like that, I'm using the wrong term, but the computer department is causing an awful lot of upgrades or changes. Is there an end to it?
Yes. Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Coos, the IT department, we actually had a lot of upgrades here in FY '24. FY '25 should be the last of our big jumps for the cybersecurity requirements. I hope there's an end to it, but it depends on the
There's gonna
fraudsters.
be an end to it.
Well, if we don't get hacked,
yeah.
that's the problem. What we do is not because we feel like it, it's because we're required by our insurance company, the fact that we take care of so many millions of dollars and personal financial information. So that's what they require.
Thank you, Manager. So one of my questions is, and we're gonna get into this in the detail when we get into the overall budgets, the individual budgets. But when we look like the capital expenditures, and I see where we weren't able to get them all done, and so that was a lot lower. The actual is gonna be 14 compared to the 29 that we budgeted for. But yet we come back with 38 million for 2025. Is that a realistic expectation?
I think it's more realistic than it was in 2024, but
I think part of what you're seeing is the port department, now that they have the funds to budget the corrosion,
It's not
supposed to be
expected,
called-
yeah.
yeah, product protection. And then you'll also see in the tourism department, there's a big project for the Thomas Basin Spruce Mill Promenade.
Right.
So those are two big, that's $15 million or
Okay.
15 million dollars right there. So that is what's driving that big, huge jump. But most of the rest of it is rebudgeting the ones that weren't completed and trying to complete those projects.
So we're gonna come back down to that 15 million mark because of those two big projects that we're looking at.
Correct.
Okay, perfect. That makes some sense. Any other questions on the Smith? Yes,
Maybe not so much a question, but I guess just my concern or gripe would be looking at, and I know you always say we don't do 100%, we do 90% or 80% or whatever, but budgeting for a $20.77 million draw on reserves when, as you mentioned, the biggest expense is personnel, over 50%, and then yet we're requesting 4.1 new positions, that's 4.1 new people that are gonna have to be paid, increasing, on an increased level every 3 years with benefits and all that, and I don't mean to be insensitive, but, drawing $21 million in the reserves, when it seems like every year we're doing that, and it doesn't seem sustainable to me, so I understand we're in a tough spot, but it seems like just seems like not a good starting point. It seems pretty irresponsible in my personal opinion.
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Gas, I completely understand. I know, I will say 0.75 or 0.85 of that is not really new people. But you're right, the other 3.5 is. And I've warned department heads that they will have to, first they had to give me their business case for that argument before I let it come to you. You're seeing about a third of what was requested. So they did have to have a good business case before bringing it before council. But our department heads all realize that they're going to have to prove their case to you, their business case for those requests.
all right.
And just to reiterate what Mayor Severson just pointed out was that there's 38 million in capital. So that draw, that is 14.6 million in the port fund, 7 million in the wastewater services fund, and 5.89 million in tourism. So that isn't an operational draw, just so you know. It's not an increase in operations, it's capital projects. Yes.
And those funds had accumulated into the port fund account. And so those monies are there. I mean, I think we had about 20 million or
It's like
something.
25 million in the port fund.
Yeah, and so we're expending some of the money that we have saved for the project. Is that,
That's correct.
yeah, so this is money that that is expected to be spent on the port as, because it came through CPVs and mortgages and stuff like that. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Mr. Mayor, City Councilmember Flores got his hand up.
Mark, sorry.
Thank you, Your Honor. Question for the manager. We recently did the port cost study. It came back to us. It was incomplete. It was an $8 million figure, but the numbers were not, the math wasn't purified. Then I saw in the memorandum for the CLIA meeting that we're going to get that done as soon as we can, pending other priorities. And now I'm sitting here listening at our annual budget cycle to, quite frankly, pretty much the same comments we all bring forward every year. And I'm just curious, you and I had a discussion, what we thought the final numbers would be somewhere between $2.5 and $3 million from the port fund back into general government. And I'm just curious when we're going to see that get done, because I'm not aware what would be more important right now. When are we going to see that math?
I would say as soon as we get through this budget process, we'll be able to do it. So we've budgeted, assuming we're not going to make extra charges against the wharfage fees. And so it's just the timing of it all. We got the cruise impact study, we had to get budget in. We had a major federal disaster that we pulled all staff on to focus on. And so I'll be honest, and it's completely my fault too, but that landslide put us back about 2 months. That's where we had to focus all, because we had to answer FEMA. If we didn't turn it in, we didn't get a declaration. And I'll be honest, it's my fault for being behind on that, but that was a priority.
Yeah, circumstances the way they are.
I would like to be able to tell you, we'll have it ready by December, we can make these budget decisions, but if not, it may have to be January, February, and then we go back and amend our budget and find those savings.
So the wharfage fees, we can spend those in a manner that we choose?
That's what we're trying to get to. And that's where I think we can easily justify the CPD spending that we do today. What we'd like to get to is say we can spend wharfage fees on X, but we will have that discussion in executive session at your next regular meeting. And I'm not going to say too much.
I just wanted to make that clarified that there's a process that we're going through to get there. Thank you. Any other questions before we, yes, Jay?
You know what? I don't mean to be a Scrooge here, but I would like to visit the longevity pay as well. That's a huge chunk of our budget too. We need to do something about that.
I would give Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Mahoney, I would give the same answer if you'd like to make a policy change to amend that to the first.
Thank you.
And we'll discuss the longevity pay somewhere in the process here anyway, right?
We have it in the budget. We can talk about it.
Yeah.
In each department.
Thank you. Any other? Anything else on the budget overview that we should be looking at? Not, let's go ahead and move into mayor and council.
Public Works.
Public Works. That's right. We're starting down there this time. That's right.
You all turn your books to Public Works Engineering.
Yep, we're there. All right.
And Seth, you can pull up a seat up front.
All right, yeah.
I brought down this. Oh, yeah. Well, but it's not like hold it.
Oh, okay.
I don't.
Okay. All right, so let me see if we can skip the first two slides because it's just a repeat of the schedule. All right, so let's start with Public Works Engineering Division. So Public Works, geez Louise, I'm having trouble tonight. Public Works Engineering Division, as a high level overview, our total budget increase request is 17%. Our operational only increase is below the 5% soft cap at 0.04%. And what that means is that when it comes to operations, it's a very small increase. The CIP increase, however, is 345%. And there is the request to refund that engineering position that led to the admin assistant for the inspectors. Public Works Engineering is also a shared services fund. That means that several funds pay into that fund as its revenue source as shared services. So they receive revenue through the general fund, Public Works Sales Tax Fund, Solid Waste Fund, Wastewater Fund, Harbor Fund, Port Fund, and KPU Fund. And so this is the engineering division, and they work with all divisions. So it is partially allocated. That means general fund does not pay all of Public Works. It's split between other funds. Next slide. The CIP request for Public Works is the dangerous building abatement and foreclosed property remediation. We've increased that to $30,000. That Fire Chief Hines has actually completed the process. We had a fire out where we used this process as a test in order to take down a building. We're trying to do that more in FY25. What I'd like to do is we go through, we do the process, place a lien on the property, or we foreclose on it and just get these derelict properties taken care of. The biggest benefit for that is if you find a property that's already got utility connections and it just has a derelict building, if you can take that down, it's very, very valuable for build because you don't have to run utility lines to it. So that's a program we'd like to continue. In addition to that, we've budgeted a small amount for building design for the heating and cooling repairs. That's really it for engineering. It's a limited section in that we have building inspection and engineering.
So Delilah, if I'm reading the sheet, so we look at the summary sheet, it says engineering 6.8%. Is that their operational?
That is the whole thing, not just operating personnel, operations, contracts, interdepartmental charges, it's everything.
So that's, what is just the operational budget if we're talking about operations?
That is just,
Because I think that includes everything, including supplies, personnel. Personnel is the example, I understand, as you said in the policy procedure. But when I look at the 6.8%, I don't know how we get to 0.04%.
what did I do there? My math is upstairs. Oh, that's because I took out the CIP personnel.
We should,
Because engineering is mostly personnel.
yeah, yeah.
And that's why. So if we take away, the 0.04 comes from take out personnel and CIP. There's not a number in here to line up with it.
No, okay, I was trying to get there so that I can figure out if we're above or below the fund balance, but I just couldn't make the leap generally, I guess.
In most of engineering, the biggest increase is that CIP.
So I always thought that the minor capital outlay was part of an operational budget when we made it. It's the major capital that is in a capital budget, and we shouldn't be deducting any major capital from the operation.
I love that you said that because that's what we're trying to change. I hate the way we do this.
Yeah.
Because the way it should be is you have minor capital, operations, personnel, everything in your regular operating budget. And then you should do a transfer out every year for your major capital. It should go to a capital fund. And so that's how we set up the rate setting policy to move forward. So what will happen is at the end of 2025, if everything works out the way you'd like it to, you'll see here, let's use engineering, for example. They have 245 grand budgeted for their CIP in engineering. What we do is we take it out of our regular operations. That's how we budget all our CIP. What we should be doing is we take 245,000, do a transfer out from here into an engineering capital fund. And that 245 sits there until they complete the project. If they don't complete the project, the money still sits there. It doesn't roll back into the general fund and go back to reserves. It stays in that capital fund. And then the next year we transfer out more to go into that capital fund and finish those projects. So instead of doing what we do every year, we go in and we say, well, we're gonna roll over, we're gonna roll over, we're gonna roll over.
I need to stop you because we do true up transfers
Oh,
on capital projects.
yeah, but that's at
then-
the end of the
But
project.
Public Works Sales Tax Fund is the one that funds engineering and public works.
Oh,
fund.
okay.
So it stays in the Public Works Sales Tax Fund, but it's all in the sales tax fund. That's
Yeah.
where we're going.
Right. But we don't have a capital fund though, that we transfer to.
Well, Public Works Sales Tax is the
Is
To the
fund.
capital.
Yeah.
capital fund.
Oh, yeah, you're right. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm getting
Okay.
confused with
So
other
no,
operations. I
operations
apologize.
should be operations, capital should be capital, because,
Correct.
you know, a lot of times when we get into a budgetary situation like this, you're gonna adjust capital more than you are operations, because you gotta have a number of people that, we provide services, we don't provide a widget, right?
Yeah.
And so when we get into a budget situation where we have a large drawdown that we can't live with, then usually there are two things that you can change that with, personnel or capital budget.
Yep.
Those are the biggest pay items we have. And so I'm just trying to make that leap here so when I look at these things, when I look at that 6.8%, is that the operating budget or is that operating budget minus something? That is the operating budget. So it goes over to 5% fund. Right? By 5.5%. And I know that's a soft cap. I get that.
Yeah.
But as I look through this, a lot of the departments have exceeded that. And so we're not following the budget policy when we do that.
Nope.
And I understand that a lot of that's gonna be personnel. Wages and benefits always go up. That's just the way it works.
Right. And that's why we pulled it out of that soft cap, because there's no way for us to, if we said, we're going to include
We'd be
personnel
going backwards.
costs and benefits, we would be going backwards because they go up with COLAs every year and our insurance has never gone down. Like hers has never said, hey, we're only gonna charge you 10% now. That doesn't happen.
Yeah.
It's our health insurance always goes up, our personnel costs always goes up, and our liability insurance always goes up.
But that's why I didn't understand the 0.04. We're actually, our operating is 6.8.
Correct.
Yeah. And so when you take the wages out of, I don't know if it's 0.04, if it's something else,
Yeah.
but I was just trying to make that leap so I can make sure that we're responsible for the budget policy that we put in place. Thank you.
I got confused with
No, I have a question.
Yes,
treating it like-
Jay.
Yes, to the manager, the dangerous building abatement fund. Okay, now you say if building burns down, we do everything and we put a lien on it. Lien to foreclosure, how long do you think that timing is and how long can we get that property back on the market?
It depends on how willing the owner is to let us foreclose. Some owners will say, go ahead and go through the process, I'll just sign it over to you. Others may make a sale prior to, and we've been fortunate in the ones that we have cleaned up. One owner, they took care of it through their insurance, and then the other owner, she sold her property before it got to that point. So we haven't been aggressive about this yet. I
So-
can't give you a good timeline of that.
So I know the borough has hired, or they contract with a realtor to manage all their property issues. And we have a number of properties that have been sitting derelict, hazardous for a number of years. And I do understand that in the foreclosure process, there's a first right of refusal. If you can put it on the market, the owner has an option for something like that. I don't know. But I agree that there's got to be a way we don't hold on to these properties as long as we're holding on to them. We need to roll them over because they're available housing in the community. And if we need extra help by contracting that service, or there's some way that we can do the paperwork to get us so that we can put them out for sale, whether it's through a realtor or outcry auction or whatever we decide that's going to be. It's better that it's in the public's hand than in our hands.
Absolutely.
That's where I want to get to. And I don't know if there's a way to speed that up without hurting ourselves, but I think that that's something that we really need to figure out how we can manage these properties better to get rid of them.
Maybe we should have an ordinance that speed up maybe 2 years, a year and a half, but some properties are sitting there for 8 and 9 years.
I don't think it's on our end. I think it's the legal end that we got to do to get through this. But if there's a process that everybody can agree to, maybe we can get these on the market quicker so somebody can take advantage of that and build on it in the community.
And the only one I'm aware of that we've done lately where it's actually come into city hands was the one that was going to come in where the little marketplaces are
Yeah.
across from Birth Free. But those ones, he paid us back before we got to the very end of that foreclosure, that process. That's the last one I'm familiar with, and I'd have to walk through that with Mitch, because again, we haven't been very aggressive about this.
No, I got a piece of property across the street from me that's been away for over 10 years.
And there's some great pieces of.
That's a great piece of property.
Yeah, there's some really great pieces. We just took off the bad building.
Yeah, and then I think another thing we could do is work with the borough, because we're now understanding that with the housing crunch, we can do some things with undersized lots. And we should make sure that any of the lots we sell, we have some process by which we can still make them a buildable lot. Just a thought. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah.
Yeah, while we're talking about those vacant lots, they're not gaining us a thing right now. They're just sitting out there getting us in trouble. And my goal isn't so much that we sell them and get something back out of them, to get a house on them with somebody living in it. So even if once we clean them up and either sold them with a criteria, if we want a house on that in a year and a half, we help them get there, or we give it to them and year and a half, I want a house on it, and we'll give you 5 years of free taxes. We're ahead. Because right now, we're not gaining nothing. So we need to think about what our policy is, how we want to deal with it.
Absolutely.
So is the city the only one that can take possession of these houses?
On the derelict buildings,
Yeah.
we actually have to file that they are a hazard, a safety hazard, so it's a health and safety issue. And I'll have to check with Mitch. I don't know if you went through, oh, you were in water when you went through. Never mind.
Never mind.
But we actually had to file, the inspectors went in, the fire inspectors went in, they said this is now posing a public danger. And then we gave them an order, they had to tear it down. And then we gave them the option, if you don't tear it down, we're gonna tear it down, and then we're gonna file a lien. Like I said, last year, we didn't really get through that whole process because the owner resolved it on their own. They took the building down and sold it themselves. But that's the first step. The first step is we go in and we make a determination that this is a health and safety hazard. Once we do that, then we go through the legal process of ordering them to clean up or us. We just haven't gotten to the or else yet.
Well, quite frankly, I think some of these places, city would be ahead to use their own crews, scrape the lots clean and have a buildable lot without any liabilities. And I think it would go for a higher price. I mean, you can see right now, lots are going for $80,000 to $100,000 easily.
With utilities, the utilities are already there.
They're already there, yeah.
Yeah.
So it just makes some sense. So we're working on engineering right now. And then we'll go to the engineering building division. So is there anything else with engineering at this particular point? And then we'll look at their capital.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'll be honest, I got a little confused. Could you explain again, there's an increase for a position of 1.0 full-time employees, but it's tied into a position that was added last year. Could you highlight that again, please?
So under building inspection, you'll see an administrative assistant. That's the one request for FTE. So what we did in FY 24 is we defunded, meaning the FTE still existed, but we took all the salary savings we had from the engineering tech positions. So this is building inspection. That's where they're asking
Right.
for the one position. But we aren't hiring anybody in those engineering tech positions. So we said, we're just gonna use this and meet the need now. So we didn't want to get rid of the engineering tech position because we still need it, if we could hire it. But we also need the admin assistant. So that's been a tremendous help in Public Works. To be honest, if we left the bid budget the way it is today for all of engineering, I still don't think we fill all those engineering positions. I mean, it's just not gonna happen. We don't have the applicant base for it. So even though it's showing the one FTE in building inspection, we use the salary savings from our engineering staff that we could finish build the engineering tech position. I think it was the engineering technician.
Rather than admin. Okay.
So the increase you're seeing in 2025 is due to bringing back that engineering tech position in engineering and then also funding the admin. So you see the increase.
Like funding it without salary savings.
Sure. Your Honor,
Yes,
I'd like to make a motion to remove the addition of that position.
which one?
We have to remove an engineering tech position because this is filled already. This
Yeah,
has-
that's the one, not the person that's been hired, but the vacant position.
I would say if you make your motion to a vacant engineering position or vacant position of that division.
I move as she stated.
Second.
Yeah. You want to tell me about that position and what it does?
Sure. Good evening, Honorable Mayor and council members. Seth Brackey, Public Works Director, Engineering Manager. So just recently, we lost one of our project engineers. She was hired by a private firm, and that was a big loss for our engineering department. So we're trying to revamp. If we were to cut this engineering tech position, that's just one less position we'd have to do engineering. So we have, as you can see from our capital needs, we have a lot of things that need fixed: bridges, roads, utilities. So taking this position away, this FTE, is going to mean we get less done, have to transfer more to consultants.
Yes. What?
So I just need clarification. You lost a person and you want to add another person.
So we currently have 2 vacancies in Public Works Engineering. And if this went through, that'd drop us back down to one vacancy that we'd try to fill.
Oh, yeah.
This is so confusing.
Sure.
So-
So we currently have 2 vacancies, 2 empty positions that we're trying to fill. And if this position was cut, then we'd only have 1 opening. We'd be down a person. So that just means we've got to go more to consultants, and they have an increased cost. They're paying their employees more, so that means we've got to pay more.
So just for clarification, are these current positions you've had in the past?
Correct.
Yes, that's correct.
Correct.
And
So these positions have already existed. They just paid for one of them out of,
So what we did is on the engineering technician, we defunded that position in order to hire the admin assistant.
okay,
So we kept the FTE, it's there, but it's an FTE of $0 essentially. And so what we're trying to do is restore that so we don't have to do consultant contracts. Like I said, I don't think we'll fill it right away because we're still looking for applicants, our project manager and our engineering position. But that's really where we are.
so we're not adding a position, we're just bringing the funding back to fund that position, is that what you're telling me?
That's correct.
Okay. Jay,
That's my frustration here. I mean, just the comment that was just made that we might not be able to fill the position. So why have it in the budget? I mean, always leave it in the reserves and come back to the council when that applicant is there. We've done it, like, we defunded the FTE and financed another admin position because the money was there. If we are not going to be able to fill that position, why have it there?
Mr. Mayor, Council
Yeah.
Member Matani, and it is a necessary position. I'll just say that's why we have it there. And our budget policy says budget for what you need, budget at the highest level. And if we don't spend it, that's when it does go back. And I completely see where you're coming from, but we are asking a lot of our staff. We've got a lot of projects to come through. We've got a lot of rehab to do. And I would rather have the ability to hire a staff member than rely on engineering contractors.
Judy.
I guess where I get confused is your comment saying, we're probably not going to be able to fill it. So why budget for it? I understand you say budget for what we need, but if we're never going to be able to fill what we need, aren't we better off if we have these projects that we need done to contract for them?
And which is what we'll have to do, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Zengi. I would recommend if we did that, at least budget us at a 0.5 FTE so we can keep it open for advertising, just in case we can fill it.
Jack.
You know, frankly, I'm of the mind that an applicant's not going to apply for a position that isn't listed. So if we remove the FTE, we're not going to suddenly get a surprise applicant for a position that the city hasn't funded. And if you could, Mr. Brackey, give us, just for my sake, a little context of what contracted work looks like or might cost the city relative to having that position filled for a project that we might be able to fill in-house. You can speak for a specific example, that'd be great, but if you could just give me just a general overview of what that looks like going to contracted services versus handling them in-house.
Sure. So, Councilmember Finnegan, I completely agree with you that if the position gets taken away, it's really hard for us to advertise it and try to fill it.
We can't.
So,
We're not allowed.
But specific to your question about private engineering and consulting compared to on staff. So what we see for billables from consultants, around $200 to $250 an hour for engineers. And we can provide that in a much more cost-effective way if they're on our staff. Plus, we don't have admin over top of that. So when we go to consultants, there's still admin. You still have to track, do pay requests, make sure they're doing what we're asking, meet with them. It's not just wave a magic wand and the consultant gets it done. You still have to work with them, make sure they're providing deliverables and following up. So it's way better, more cost effective for the city if we have them on staff.
Judy.
Yeah, and I don't argue that, but what I'm having a real big problem with is if we have these jobs and we need to get them done, but we can't hire someone, but we need to move forward, why wouldn't we contract that and then maybe keep the 0.5 so you can advertise for the job? But I just don't I mean, to me, it's not making sense. I'm sorry.
And I apologize that Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Zingy, that's completely my fault. What it is we're just not doing the work, period. So when we can advertise, when we can go out to a contractor, that's what we do with our CIPs. We do make it a big project, but all the little things, the little design, the little surveys, we lost our surveyor, correct? We can't even get a survey anymore. We have to contract out. We just don't do it. And so we're not performing the level of service that we should be.
Okay, so that's different than,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm making the assumption that we're staffing to accomplish the work.
Right.
And you're gonna accomplish that work either with an employee or a contractor. And so to me, if you can't, at some point in time, and I don't know when that point is, you gotta decide, I can't fill it, I gotta go get a contractor. So to me, the FTE is an immaterial thing. It's the fact that the money's there to get a job done, and hopefully we get it done the best way. But what I don't want to do is to see any of that money sitting there, even with the FTE unfilled, and then go into another project. It's strictly for what it was determined to be. But to me, if we've got to have the people do the work, whether it's a contractor, which is more expensive, like Seth said, or the other way, yeah.
So,
Mr. Mayor, Councilmember, again, that's my fault. We just don't do the work. We just won't provide that service that we need.
No,
But we got a job, we got to have completed, that project needs to be done,
On the CIPs, we do.
gotta be done.
so, as we talked about the positions, you said at one time you defunded the position, but we could have still advertised the position. So what we're talking about here, rather than fund that, leave the FTE in place. I don't have a problem with that, and advertise for it. If this is a $200,000 a guy with all benefits in, and we don't hire him until half the year, you come back and ask for the appropriation to be put in for that guy. We only spend the 100,000, right? We're still keeping the position. We still want to fill it, but we don't have to budget for it at this particular point in time, because when we fill it, that's when we start paying. It could be we don't hire him until October, and then we only pay a quarter of it, right? Can that be done?
Well, can I ask a question of, when you're looking at the budget, don't you want to know now what that will cost? Because
We know what it'll cost if we hire him in January.
you do,
But-
because we put it in the budget.
Yes, he's there, right? But if we don't have to budget for the dollar amount right now, we know that it potentially can cost us that much. That money doesn't get spent. It's not even in the budget. We can appropriate, we have the power to appropriate at any time that we hire that position in.
But you are then requiring staff to then take time to come back to count. Not that that's an issue, but how many positions are you now having to take back to council? We could,
$3.1 million worth.
well,
That's what the vacancy position. I'm not saying we don't hire these people,
sure,
and
But-
I already understand what it's gonna cost me. That money will be in reserve account.
but you're going back to council at a
Yep.
time when you're already negotiating with an employee and saying this cost, and then what happens if he comes back to council and then you say, well, we don't have the revenue. Right? So what we're looking at is the highest cost, so that you know what that highest cost is, and to ensure that we have the structure, the rate structure in place to be able to fund it. Because if it's tomorrow, if it's January 1, tomorrow, November 10th, what's today? I don't know.
But
November 26th, then it needs to be funded because we've got the FTE.
Yeah.
It's.
But if we're gonna hire a general laborer, I'm not gonna hire him in at an H at the highest rate. That's not gonna do it. So I don't have to necessarily put that money into the policy says I gotta do it at the highest rate. So how many more $1,000 is that? $20,000? I don't know what it is. But I'm just saying, I want to fill the positions. But do we necessarily have to encumber that money at the time now, when we know that we're probably not gonna fill it until mid-year, if not October? If at all. That's just a question.
Yeah, no, that's a, I haven't done it. I mean, I'm really thinking now of what it would look like, because your spending plan is what the budget is.
Yep.
And I'm wondering,
Spending plan.
it's just a spending plan. It has nothing to do with the actual cash. And I'm wondering if council would like to see instead a vacancy report every month, like this is our salary savings for January. Or maybe quarterly, so you all know this is the salary, and maybe we do transfer back into reserves and
Well,
budget.
Yeah, the problem is
But-
whatever we end up budgeting affects the rate we may have to put in effect to cover it.
Right.
If I back 3.1 million out of this, and we never could fill those positions, not because we don't want to, because they don't materialize, then, it's, I don't know, it's just, I don't think private business puts money into a wage position when they think about hiring a person. When they hire them, then they start paying. I just don't know if that works or not here, but that's my, yes.
I don't mean to beat a dead horse, because I know we're kind of going on and on with this, but I would just say one other thing that seems off with me is, and I don't remember, I'm sure we voted on it last year, but it just seems a little strange to be doing what we did before, where we're taking money from one position to create it to another, because then we end up in this weird scenario where we have added a position and a salary and a cost, but here we are discussing whether or not we want to undo a position. So next time, it seems that maybe a better practice would be just to say, like for the assistant position at the building inspection, if we would have just said, this is a new position we're gonna add now, here's what it'll cost, and not try to pick it from another one, you know? Just a thought.
Anybody else? Yes, Dick.
Yeah, I'm still trying to figure out how to get the job done. You know, we said we got this much work, it takes this many people, and we've asked for this many people. Now, we could have asked for one person and a consultant. And then what would we be doing? We wouldn't even be arguing about the consultant because it's buried in the price. Right?
So I think I can simplify it a little bit. To accomplish the work that we're proposing, we need 2 positions. We're asking for those 2 positions to be filled. If you guys choose to cut one, that's certainly your prerogative. But as Public Works Director, Engineering Manager, I'm asking for 2 positions. One of them's extra FTE. If you guys don't want to do that, okay. Like,
in mind
I
that-
would, that's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking for the position to be added. At the end of the day, that's a decision you guys have to make.
Make it 7. Judy?
So I guess it comes back to our policy. We could change our policy not to fund these positions, not budget these positions to the highest level, right? Because when they say they come back, when you guys say, they come back to the table, I seem to think that we come back to the table, or you guys come back to the table more because we haven't put enough money towards a position, and we're not meeting what they pay in the lower 48, right? I mean, you never come back and say, well,
We pay too much.
yeah, you budgeted too much. Exactly. So to me, I don't know why we couldn't just change the policy to have it, some lower amount. Because I wonder, when we budget for these positions and we have to raise our rates because we're not meeting our budget expectation, that doesn't make sense to me either. I mean, I just think we should just lower that a little bit. Make it a middle range or something.
So our, not budget until we fill it. I mean, that's not a problem. I think we have monies in reserves to do that kind of stuff. We just we know the FTE is gonna cost us this much.
Right.
But as with other outfits, it's just something to think about. Yes, it's an interesting idea to do that way, and then we don't have to raise the budget artificially because we can't hire people. And that's happening all over. We've had a 25% vacancy rate for a long time. Is that much? Yeah. Yes.
Can we just make it a practice that if we have unfilled positions that have a low chance of filling, that we just put it in as a half of a person? Because we're not going to expect to get them until June.
Probably ought to do that with linemen, to be honest, because.
And that would be a more accurate budget position.
You could certainly look at how long it's been vacant and then the likelihood of whether or not that's going to be filled. And yeah, I think you could probably allocate, depending on what the position is, either a 0.5 or some factor that.
That's a great example, Mr. Mayor, Councilmember Kistler, because if the engineering technician, for example, that's the position, we've already moved that to an admin assistant.
Yeah.
But the EIT has been vacant since March. It's been hard to fill, and I think the borough, they've actually just eliminated their position because they couldn't fill their engineering technician. They went with a vendor instead. Of course, it's a higher expense, but that's what they had to do. But, I would feel more comfortable at least having something in there, even if it's a 0.5, so we can advertise and not have to come back to council for reappropriation. Because the reality is we'll be able to find savings somewhere.
Sure.
But we would, I would prefer just to have something in there in the budget. And it may not be the full. A 0.5, I think, is reasonable, open for 7 months.
Yeah.
But
Or
just
3,
keep
or
in
whatever
mind-
we decide that number is, right? Because we're not going to exhaust our unappropriate. We're gonna have reserves, and that's where that money, it's a matter of us to appropriate. We already know that it's a potential because we're leaving the FTE in the budget. And then there's gonna be the same situation is that when you start reclassification, that scale's gonna change, that rate's gonna change. But this allows you to adapt for that, I think.
Another thing we may need to consider, as Councilmember Coos was saying, who's getting the work done.
Yep.
So in this division, if they don't have the employees and they have to contract out, that hasn't been factored into the budget. So those wages potentially can be moved to the contract services and they are more costly. So if we're,
It's not money savings.
yeah.
Yeah, you got a 2-man crew on your garbage truck. You can't run it with one. You're not gonna get the work done. That's the way it works. So,
If you would like to,
we have a motion on the floor right
if you
now.
have, yeah, if you have a motion to amend or, at this point, it's a 1 point FTE. So depending on what the council decides, then we'll bring back the budget update if necessary.
Is there any
Yeah,
amendment?
I would like to propose a 0.5 FTE for that
We have a
position.
motion.
a
on the
There's
motion.
a
floor.
motion
floor.
to eliminate an FTE.
She's moving to amend
She's
it.
moving to amend it to,
No, wait a minute, it doesn't work because his is to eliminate it.
is to eliminate.
So let's vote on that motion first.
Okay,
Motion was to eliminate the
one
And-
FTE engineering tech
engineering tech.
in the Public Works Department.
Madam
Ooh.
Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Coos,
Yeah, no.
Zingy,
No.
Kistler,
No,
Flora,
No.
Finnegan,
No.
Gas,
Yes.
Matani.
Yes.
That fails, Your Honor.
All right, do we have another
I would
motion?
like to propose that we change that to a 0.5 for the position, the engineering position.
Engineering tech.
Second.
Should,
Engineering tech.
I think that we should make a motion to bring back
All of them as
uh, um,
recommended.
we're gonna cover all vacant positions
Yeah.
in this manner that have been vacant for a certain amount of time. So if you can come back with a budget update, what that would look like, right? That we're thinking? Because it makes sense across the board.
All vacant or just ones that are over a certain period?
I think over a certain period, and I'd let you guys kind of determine what that looks like, because we know we're not gonna fill some of the line positions and other positions anytime soon. So to budget for them and not fill them, I don't think is responsible at this particular point in time. We're gonna keep the FTEs, we just don't know when we're gonna fill them.
So budget at a reasonable factor according to how long they've been vacant.
That makes sense? They give you guys enough to bring back up?
We can propose and then.
Yeah. That's, okay, thank you. So is there a second for it?
Second.
And been moved second.
Rather than the 0.5, we're going,
Overall,
we're going to an overall
percentages.
budget. So that'll come back to you at the next.
Through a policy, yes.
Can you clarify the motion, please?
To change that all FTEs that are not currently used, the vacant FTEs, change the budgeting according to the percentage of chance there is that it will be filled. Like those that you expect them to be filled immediately, they should be a full person. And then those that you don't think are gonna be filled immediately, maybe a 0.5% or whatever they would.
Maybe
Yeah.
something that's been vacant
Can
for
I
6
say
months. or
direction
something.
to staff is to analyze vacant positions, time of vacancy, and recommend funding for FY 25 based on that. Or recommend partial funding.
But we are discussing engineering, public work engineering here. Can we make that motion here?
Absolutely. It's a policy decision regardless of where the vacancy is at.
Okay.
And I think we should treat it fair across the
We
board.
just can't talk about KP.
Yeah, we're just gonna, it's fair across the board. We're looking at a policy and it'll affect all the city at this time. And then we can adopt it when we get into the other budget. Yes, Judy?
And when would that come back to us, that analysis?
Try to get it by Monday.
Oh, well, okay, cool.
Good.
We'll try.
So there's motion on the floor. There's a motion on the floor, would you please call the roll? Oh, what, yeah,
Discussion?
yes.
I just don't know if I agree with this because like Judy said, most of the time when these come up throughout the year, we end up having to allocate more money for these positions anyway. So I actually see their point in that if the position's gonna be there on the books, take the conservative approach to put it in the budget so we're not surprised or we don't have to go scramble for more money, you know, in the middle of the year. I've been listening to this, to your thoughts, and I just don't quite think I agree with them because I think we're better off to just see it all up front, and that's basically worst case scenario versus if we do all of them across the board at 50% and they get hired on within a month or 2 or 3 or 4 months. So respectfully, I don't think I'm in favor of this unless somebody can.
So, I mean, we're not gonna take all the positions. The ones that are rotating over that.
Or the ones that have been vacant for a long time.
Yeah,
I got
yeah.
it.
So we have some that aren't gonna be filled at all this year. We know that.
Sure.
It just, and in other industries and other things that I sit on, like trying to hire an engineer, it's almost impossible to get them. So you don't know when you're gonna get those guys on. What we're trying to do is reduce the amount of money we stick into the budget right now to fund those positions, and then it just stays on the book and we never use it. So why not budget, why not say, if I'm gonna hire this guy in July, I'm only paying half of that. I'm not budgeting and affecting the potential rate increase because I got this other 6 months that.
And then that could potentially prevent some of these situations where in the middle of the year, we end up seeing these requests for purchases or other expenditures that weren't expected. And then we say, well, we have this money, so we got to spend it like it has happened recently.
Correct.
So,
Yeah.
okay, well, you might be talking me into it.
Put that one out of the mark.
Open tab.
Yeah, I think it's a more responsible way to handle the situation in regards to this, because we do put a lot of things in there. When we put a budget together, it's our best estimation or guess, right? So if we can build some things in to make it more conservative, I think that's a better idea.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Please call the roll.
Finnegan,
Yes.
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 Matani,
Yes.
Goose,
Yes.
Flora,
Yes.
Zingy,
Yes.
Kistler.
Yes.
And that passes, Your Honor.
Thank you. Building, anything else in building?
Ready for the cemetery?
What's that?
Ready for cemetery?
I'm gonna ask for, is there anything on capital for,
Oh, yeah, sorry.
yeah, capital?
Engineering, sorry.
So Seth, I don't see anything in here for paving.
For engineering, we do have capital requests, and it's just the dangerous building abatement and then the heating repairs design. That's it.
Yeah, so usually we have, where does the paving usually come in if we have,
That's in streets.
that'll be in the street division?
In the street section. correct.
All right, sounds good.
And then I have a question, just as a format. This year, we put the capital behind the department just for the deliberation process. Obviously, we'll have the 5-year program, but we put it behind each department. And so I would like to know if that is helpful for you, or would you prefer it all in one booklet like we usually, as we present it in final form?
I like it.
I like
Yet to
it.
be
Just have to
decided.
Get used to it.
Yeah,
Like
it
this.
just makes
I like
it
it
a little
better.
bit more handy because it's right
Yeah.
behind the department.
You don't have to put them in the book.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry to be.
Anything else on engineering? Thank you, Seth.
Let me see if we can go to cemetery.
Okay,
Cemetery is not so easy. It really isn't. There we go.
and so when we say operations, that's really the contract?
Correct. That's mostly contract and supplies and minor capital. So it's really everything but the CIP
Yeah.
when we say operations. So The operating increase for cemeteries is 9.2%. I have a little red X, that means it's out of policy. If it's got a green checkbox, that means it's within your budget policy and your council directives. If it's got a red X, it's not. The reason is because our minor capital outlay increased from $500 to 16,000 because we need to replace the benches and waste receptacles at the cemetery. Typically, we just do minor purchases, but that's really a need this year. That accounts for the majority of that 9.2% increase. The total increase is 139%, but that's because of major capital outlay, which is the 1.2 million for the cemetery expansion. We have a green box because there are no FTEs in the cemetery, and we don't have any rate increases programmed for FY25. However, I will give you a warning that I've met with the clerk. I have a task for Michelle after budget is done. To start looking at new rates for maintenance in future. So what I found interesting, most cemeteries, what you do every time you sell a plot of land in the cemetery, let's say it's $10,000. I know that's a really big amount, but if you were to sell your plot for $10,000, that goes into a permanent fund, and then the investment interest is what's supposed to fund maintenance of your cemetery. We never did that. That is not how we operated. So this was new to me. I hadn't really dug into what our process was until this year when I met with Kim. We just said, this is what the rate's going to be. This is what we're going to charge. So we don't have, if you were running a cemetery like normal, you would have a cemetery permanent fund, and it would just grow and grow and grow as people bought pieces of land. And then that investment income, the interest income essentially, would be funding your operations in perpetuity. So that's how it should work. That's not what we did. We just sold the spaces, we sold the crypts and whatnot. So we are going to be talking about that, what that should look like in the future, particularly with the sale of the new crypts and the new pieces whenever we do the expansion. So the CIP here, we've been talking about this expansion for at least the whole time I've been here and the year before that. And that's the 1.2 million. So Lacey, if you could go to the next. And you'll see that in the little chart. You've got the giant green bar because we're doing the expansion. So with the CIP for the cemetery, we're looking for the office foundation stabilization, the cemetery expansion, and then the grading and drainage improvements. And that's really the big cost increase for cemetery. The majority of this, I've listed it on the slide. It's coming from Public Works Sales Tax Fund, except for the 12,000, which is the cemetery development fund. And we typically budget 12,000 every year for that. That work.
Could you let, I have a hard time with $16,000 for 8 benches and 6 trash receptacles.
So I don't know if you can talk about the benches or receptacles, the 16,000
Seems a little high. I don't know.
for the minor capital outlay.
Sure. Mayor Severson, that's the estimate we put in there. Obviously, if we don't spend that, or if that's not how much they are, we're not gonna spend that. So it's just an estimate.
So, Delilah, when we put a capital project or spending out like this and we budget 16 and we spend 10, what happens to that other 6,000?
It goes back into reserves.
It goes back in the reserve.
Unless the department head comes in and says, can I use the leftover? I'll be honest, I typically tell them no. That's been something new this year, but I don't, just because you have leftover doesn't mean you get to keep it. This gives me a great opportunity to share something I've shared with staff. Next year, when we go through CIP, we'll be looking at Public Works Sales Tax Fund, and we will be ranking projects 1 through 30. So we aren't going to say, what we do in today's world is we say every division turns it in and says, these are my priorities 1 through 5. And then I have to go through and cut and decide what's important and then bring it to council. Next year, we're going to, as a group, whoever's involved with Public Works Sales Tax Fund is going to sit around the table and say, these are priorities 1 through 30. So if I finish priority 1 and I still have $60,000 left over, I don't get to spend my $60,000. It drops back down into that Public Works Sales Tax Fund for the next priority. So if 1, 2, 3, and 4 come in $50,000 in their budget, that 50 is going to go back down. If you don't get to keep it because you saved money. And so we're all going to have to agree this is how it works. And it could be I don't get a Public Works Sales Tax Fund project for 3 years. because other priorities took precedent. So instead of saying every division gets a little piece, we're going to, as department heads, decide this is what's best for the city, and we all agree on it. So I'm working on that process for next year.
So the other question is, who's walking their dogs up there?
Yeah. Dog waste.
Humane shelter.
So it is right next to the animal shelter.
There you
So,
go.
there are volunteers that do come in and volunteer their time to walk the dogs from the animal shelter. So, it also does get used by the public on, so anywhere you have public, you have the need for cleanup.
Whether or not we decide to allow dogs in the yard, other things, so. Right.
This isn't necessarily directly related to the budget, but it's something that I've been receiving. The most amount of complaints I've received on any topic this year has been about the cemetery with the new, and I understand it's a private contract to an individual or company. But I guess my questions are just in regards to that. What is because I've received a lot of complaints. I've gone up there. I've seen some of the complaints that are valid as far as just a total lack of upkeep compared to how Steve and Jimmy did it for years on end. I thought everybody seemed to think they did a real good job. So I assume there's a contract, and is the current contractor meeting their requirements? And could you elaborate on what the protocol is if they're not, and how to go about that? Because I mean, we're paying them a good bit of money, and I feel like we're getting shorted a little bit. Maybe.
Sure. So our current contractor, is new, but any complaints that come up or concerns should first go directly to him and then also to Public Works. So Public Works manages that contract. We have a process in place to take concerns and get them addressed with the contractor. So please do bring them to me, and we'll do what we can to get them addressed.
Has Public Works seen a large increase in the number of complaints over the last couple of years?
So it's new this year, our contractor's new
Or this year?
this year.
Right.
But I have not, but I'm happy to hear them, and we'll get on it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Anything else? Cemetery. Moving on.
That brings us to the tough one, streets. You'll see those big green bars, majority of their expenditures are capital. And that's why those green bars are so tall. Streets is actually requesting a total budget decrease of 47.4%. And that is because we decreased the capital expenditures. So when you look at the total budget, it's decreasing because of capital expenditures. However, if we look at just operational, it means we took out the CIP, we took out personnel. We're seeing a 14.5% increase, which is beyond the 5% of the budget policy. This is due to an increase in overtime expense, an increase in the telecommunication expense, and I covered that a little bit during the budget overview. Every division is going to see some kind of increase in telecommunication expense because one of our IT projects has been to close our network. And so what it is we'll have our own dedicated fiber lines within all city departments. So there are no ports coming into our network. So myself at home, when I'm on my KPU fiber connection, I'm sharing that line with all my neighbors and whoever else is a KPU subscriber. With our upgrades, we have a closed network. Nobody is going to have access to our networks. We're trying to push everything there because when it comes to SCADA, when it comes to customer security, when it comes to financial security, that's one of our cybersecurity requirements. You cannot have a network that's accessible by the public and open. And so you're going to see a big telecommunication expense to everybody. That's not their fault. Had we not done that, they probably would have been okay within in the expense, but it is something we have to do for our cybersecurity, and it's just a cost of doing business in today's very threatening world of hacking. And there are no FTE changes with streets. Lacey, if you can go to the next slide.
Question.
Yeah.
So, but the Second Avenue is part of those CIPs.
That's correct. So Second Avenue is in there. We're estimating a $313,000 portion for streets. Did mark on that. We are going to be applying for reimbursement for FEMA, but we still have to spend the money before we're reimbursed. It's 100% reimbursement. It's not granted like a loan would be, where we get all the cash and then we can spend it. We actually have to spend it first and then apply. And I can't put the FEMA matches in the budget because the work orders haven't been issued. So we haven't gone through that whole process, but we still need to get the work done. In addition to that, let's see. Yeah, the sales bridge, sales board bridge, that $150,000 we have to program in because it's part of our ADOT match. So ADOT is actually doing that work. They're contracting it. They're working with everything, but we have to match the $150,000 for that work. Everything else is on us.
Anybody have any other things going through? I see we've upped the training and education. Is that through the HR department request or?
That one is actually some of our professional education and something else that we have to continue. We didn't do it this year. We skipped a lot of our training. So we actually did not spend as much of our FY24 training budget because we skipped. So we have to make up for it.
And Delight, we have our street foreman here, do we not?
Oh, there we go.
Please bring them up and introduce them.
Sure.
It's good for the council to know these guys.
Yeah.
Avery Severson, let me introduce Joe Knoll. He's our street supervisor.
Hello.
Hello, Joe. Thank you for being here tonight.
Yeah.
And of course, we all understand the job that the street does. And the projects that you have going on and of course, this time of year with snow and ice and everything else. Is there any comments you want to make in regards to any of the things that we're doing with the project?
Well, the reason for the training is we got the Vector this year, but we didn't, once we got the Vector, there wasn't enough training available through Vectors. They provide it, so then we just had to roll it over the next year.
Okay.
So I can get the guys trained up on the Vector.
So does Vector actually send a guy in to do this?
No, we'll send guys.
We send guys out to the factory?
Yep.
Okay.
We did have a Vector rep come with the piece of machinery and give us some training here on our machine. This is just the next step in that.
Perfect. Thank you. Anything else in streets that you guys are looking at? So one of the conversations and comments you've heard today is in regards to stairways. How many stairways do we have? Do you have any idea?
60,
we got
68, I believe.
Wow.
Just over 60.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so when we're talking about stairways, and I don't know how many of you get to as far as rebuild a year or,
We're trying to do at least 1 to 2.
okay. So you have a carpenter crew of 4 guys or something like that?
Yeah, it's usually 3 to 4.
Yeah. And then, of course, materials, you gotta order those up from out of state because we have no mills in town anyway cutting that lumber. And I think that actually the standards have changed, so anytime you touch a stairway, you may have to bring it up to code, is that correct? Railing size and stuff.
When we do maintenance on the stair, we can keep it as is. If we're doing a rebuild, we've got to bring it up to current standards. That's the biggest challenge. Codes have changed a lot, so we've got to meet them when we rebuild.
And we're also using metal tread now with new builds that,
No, we got rid of all the metal chairs that we ordered a few years back.
mm-hmm,
We went back to wood.
okay.
Because.
Yep.
Because.
The metal treads that were ordered weren't up to code.
Oh.
From what I know, so they all got sold in that auction, I believe 2 years ago. So we don't even have any at this point.
It was a
And they're
public
popular.
safety issue with heels and different things like that that created.
Sure is
hazard.
nice in the snow, though.
They are nice in this stuff. But there's a liability associated
Yeah.
with that if somebody were to stick a shoe or
Yeah.
a heel in them.
You get stuck and fall.
Yeah, all year round.
So every 34 years, you get a new staircase.
Yeah.
Good man.
Well, that's a long time for a staircase.
Got anything else in operations for the street department?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor,
Yeah,
I don't think these folks have got anything to do with this, but, maybe they can deal with who does. The tank traps that are in front of Tongass Federal Credit Union that was left that way from putting the sewer line sucker thing in there. I know you guys can't fix it, but maybe whoever left those,
that's our
the war
contract.
zone through there can fix it.
We can definitely take a look at that.
Yeah.
So the,
Just drive through.
the sewer project was City of Ketchikan, and then the DOT has road improvements that are headed that direction. So the DOT project only got about as far as Washington Street, Jefferson Street. But as soon as next spring hits, the DOT project will continue on headed south.
I realize that, but means we've got to deal with that half a block for all winter.
Yeah.
Yeah, so there's a way that we can level that out. In our, the sewers transit, our contractor left, it's not up to snuff. I don't think so either. I complained about that a month, 2 months ago. And it's only gonna get worse. Unfortunately. Anything under operation? How about capital, guys? You got anything under capital for them? Yes.
The dump truck. We have a current dump truck, right? And how operational is it? And how much do we need to spend this money to get a new dump truck?
Yeah, let me grab, hold on, I have a visual aid.
He's prepared, man.
Obviously not as good. There you go.
This was a priority for the garage also, like that was their recommendation. I would say because of the specialty equipment, tires are very expensive, they're special orders.
Slide.
Thank you.
Oh, those are nice looking tires. They look new.
Well, this is an all-wheel steer, all-wheel drive. This is what you would typically see in Chicago, all over the Pacific Northwest in regards to snow removal. It's probably one of the better brands for that particular operation. It has a hydraulic down power blade on it, and it's equipped that you could put a front blade if you're doing rural communities. And I see that a lot of the stuff we have here, I don't know what the frame's like, but I see the boxes in pretty tough shape. Because it has salt in it. Yes, Riley.
Yeah, thank you for the pictures, but it looks like a little surface rust on the box, but I'm curious on the undercarriage and the frame. I mean, darn near every rig in town's got a little rust on the box.
Sure, so I provided several photos there. Let me, if I could just give a brief narrative. So the dump truck for streets that's in question, that's this first page. This is the Oshkosh dump truck. So you can see its existing condition. It's 22 years old. And we're proposing to replace it with the next page, which is a truck similar to this. So this is an existing truck that we have that we would replace Oshkosh with something very similar to this. So looking through our public works vehicle fleet, it's extremely old. Like it's not in good shape. So also we have our garage supervisor, Nick Galloway here, who can speak to these. He's the one working on them. But if you choose to keep an old fleet, it means you have to pay the money to repair it. In the case of the Oshkosh, parts are becoming impossible to find. So highly recommend that we replace this truck with something modern that we have parts for that's similar to another vehicle in our fleet. So we can go out and plow the snow and do what we need to do out in the streets. So that's our recommendation.
Yes, Jay.
Just to follow up, if you do order this truck, how long of the time is it out?
I'm sorry, one more time, the question?
How long will it take you to get your inventory in hand when you place the order?
Oh, when we place the order, how long will it take to get the truck? Nick, maybe you can speak to that? It's been quite a while. We've had long lead times. It is getting a little better, but best thing we can do is get it ordered right away.
So most of the chassis take the longest to get. Most of the outfit is within 90 days, but for this style truck, we'll probably be looking at a year to 18 months to receive.
And when we order this truck, Nick, it comes with a plow package and a box. Is that correct? It's all box?
So yeah, this truck will be, they'll have a belly blade, so underbody scraper, have a plow, dump body, and then also a spreader that goes in the back. That also has the capability of doing mag chloride for the streets for de-icer. So it's more than just a dump truck. It's a multi-use, can be used year-round. The spreader can be removed and then turns into a dump truck for the summer season. So.
Thank you.
The-
Yes. What?
And what kind of body is it?
It's an international chassis with a, it's basically a 5-yard dump truck. And then, yeah, underbody scraper, Henderson products on it. So it'll be Henderson dump body, plow and underbody scraper, and then also the spreader.
So Nick, this is also pretty much our fleet design, is it not? We're doing all the internationals.
Yes, so we're only doing internationals, Cummins engines and Allison transmissions. So it's all across everything the same. We only have to deal with one manufacturer computer. We don't have to have several different ones. The Oshkosh does have a CAD in it, but it is 23 years old. You can't necessarily get parts for them anymore. The Oshkosh is the same. The rear axle for it has rear steer. That system is now down. We cannot repair it. You cannot get parts for it. The only way to repair it is to actually replace the whole axle assembly, which would be upwards of $20,000+ just to get the rear steer back on. So it's just it's in bad shape.
And we trust that it'll be operational until such time.
For the most part, it's just trying to keep it going as much as we can. It's similar to their Vector. We try to minimize as much repairs as we could on it and just do bandage just to keep it till we get the new chassis, which now we do have a new one. So the Vectors, finally, we don't have to put any more money into it. Vector in that example from the year before was it typically costs about $50,000 a year to keep that in service. So this is very similar. The longer we wait, the more it costs for a new vehicle. And then also on top of the maintenance.
Thank you.
Quick
Yes,
question, the
Riley.
rear steer, is that just for being able to do tighter turns or?
Yeah, it's the maneuverability for it. For tire turns, our other trucks do not have that. It's not necessarily a good system. They have issues, so we've gone away from that. But
It provided us with great service as long as it was in service. So.
yeah.
Your Honor, may I, there's one more picture in here. I just want to make sure for clarity, it's the one that has 269 on it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a wastewater dump truck. We are proposing to replace it. It's currently broke down, but we can talk about that, when we get the wastewater.
Sounds good. Anything else with street? Thank you, guys.
It'll take us to garage.
Seeing nothing else in the street, we'll move on to garage. Thank you.
garage division, they are proposing a total budget decrease of 22.2%, as well as an operational decrease of 15%. There are no FTE changes and no CIP requests for FY25. If counselors will recall, we did have a big CIP for FY24. That was their oil recycler project, but we don't have anything for FY25.
I don't think I've ever seen that.
How dare you?
Nick has his hands full. That's really the bottom line.
And so what did we see the reductions?
It was
I see
CIP.
that there was a large reduction in regard to,
It was the CIP.
okay.
Operations went down too, though.
Operations, I think it was under the
Interdepartmental charges, I think.
Oh, transferred some out.
Yeah, the reimbursable credits.
Yeah.
So they hired a new person in 2024 and that helped increase. So if they have personnel, then they can charge that time on other projects. So that helps with their reimbursable credits.
Perfect. And thank you guys for what you do. So this is probably an opportune time just to plant the seed. But, you know, a lot of companies and a lot of governmental organizations have universal service agreements to where you have a single motor pool, everything comes to, and you can potentially, you do all the city, get all the trucks and stuff all belong to the city, get paid out of a separate account. And another thing I know, and Dick could probably speak to this better than I can in the Forest Service, you start putting replacement money in place for the replacement of that vehicle. So by the time you get there, you have the funding available to do that. So I'd just like to see something like that in the future.
So would Delilah.
Yes, Mr. Mayor, so you will be seeing a policy coming to you hopefully in January to do this. So when we set our rate setting policy, we actually set up a vehicle acquisition and replacement fund in the rate setting policy. We haven't acted on it yet because we're just surviving today. But that's the idea, is that every year, if I were to buy a $500,000 vehicle, I know in 10, 15, well, in our case, 22 years, I'm gonna have to replace it. So I should be putting away $40,000 every year, knowing at some point I gotta replace this vehicle. So what should happen is I buy my vehicle out of the vehicle acquisition fund, and then every year I do a transfer out into VAF to replace that vehicle down the road. So I will be coming to you with that policy. What I'd like to see is that Nick and his team are telling us this is what the priorities are. It's not a decision of the department head. He already does that. He goes to the vehicle priority list and tells us this is what's really important. But it becomes a decision of the fleet manager to say this is the best use of the fleet. One of the coolest things I've tried before, we actually had fleet pools. And so you sort of had to check out your vehicle from the garage. So if I Public Works, I need to have an inspector's vehicle and I'm gonna keep it all year, I have to check it out at Public Works. You have to tell me, yes, you're taking good care of my car. Yes, you get to keep it. Yes, you're doing a good job. And they have that control of it. And I know I told Mayor Bob, my dream is to have one fleet garage where everything is set up in a nice garage, a nice lay down yard, a nice warehouse, but that's down the road.
Yeah, and that'll take a number of bays and a number of mechanics to service all the vehicles the city owns. And so, yeah, just one of my thoughts. Is there anything else in operations? Yeah.
I'll just make a quick comment on this working capital fund. That's what you call whenever I was working. But every mile I drove that vehicle, I kicked in so many cents per mile into the pot. And so at the end of whatever the life of that vehicle was, 7 years, 10 years, the money was there to replace it if it needed to be replaced. And that mileage that I paid covered everything, my gas, my oil, my repairs, and everything. So it's gonna be a little bit of bookkeeping, so you're gonna have to know what each vehicle is costing. But at least ways I, as the owner or driver, know the more I drive it, the more I'm gonna pay. But I got a vehicle when I get done. It'll take time to get there.
I love that everybody's on that same page because that's what we need to get to.
Well, it just makes sense. Same way in the building maintenance, I think that similar type thing. So, one of the things I'd like to comment on, and it's not in this year's budget, but I see the first item that you have is equipment storage and garage replacement. That's equipment shed behind the Public Works warehouse. The crew itself built that shed a number of years ago, and it sounds like it's in need of repair or replacement. But 640,000 isn't gonna get you there because that building needs a concrete floor. It needs drains, so when your equipments are leaking and that kind of stuff, it goes into an oil water separator, that type of thing. And right now, they're still open to the weather. When you got a vehicle like the Vector or sweepers that carry water on them, the potential for damage to those is great. And of course, we all know that the longer it's outside, even if it's not just the rain, it's just the weather changes and stuff on it, it's more detrimental to it. So I really like the departments to think about what that building should look like. It should have roll-up doors for security, so people don't have access to the vehicles. And anything else that we may need, just so that we have an idea. But I understand too that we're still not nailed down on what we're gonna have to do with wastewater and whether that, I don't wanna build a building there and tear it down. So,
I will tell you, Seth and I have talked about it, we need to find another place for our fleet garage because eventually we will need that
or wastewater. And potential for, if we ever put another diesel in, it might be the place to put the next diesel in too.
It's inevitable to
Yeah.
move that.
So, anybody else? Anything else for the garage? Thank you, guys. And by the way, if we finish it, you guys can leave, I think. You can go home. Unless you're really interested. So on to the next one.
All right, Ms. Rayner will go on to building maintenance. Building maintenance, their overall budget increase is only 3%.
When you go back to sharing it, it doesn't want to.
Oh. That's okay. And you'll see building maintenance, majority of our expenses in personnel, because it is a small budget. That's really why. The biggest change in building maintenance, the total budget is only 3% when we look at capital and everything else. But the biggest increase again is for that telecommunications cost, because we're hitting every department with that closed network cost. On building maintenance, there are no FTE changes. We're a small but mighty fleet. The telecommunications increase really accounts for it, the 21,000. Their CIP request is flat, and that goes back again to the City Hall HVAC replacement for $200,000. Lacey, could you go to the next slide on building maintenance? This is cost by programs. It's really just our operations, City Hall, the Shoreline building, which is tiny, as well as the orphan buildings, and then some of our capital. So that just gives you a breakdown. But really, building maintenance is fairly simple, with the biggest request being in the telecommunications, which again is not their fault, and I did not have to do that to them. It's a pretty tiny budget with the CIP request.
Anything else? Yes, Dick.
Just a quick comment. Seemed like the last time I was here for several years, we were always working on the HVAC, and we're still working on it. Are we gonna fix it this time? Or we just keep working on it?
I will give it to Amanda. She's actually working on a mechanical engineering task order contract, so we could hire several mechanical engineering firms in order to meet our needs and not wait forever of trying to find a contractor, trying to find the work. I won't even speak to it. I can let Seth speak to this building.
It's an old building, it's a problem.
Yeah, we're old building built on top of an older building.
Thank you, Councilmember Coos. Our hope is to try to address it holistically more than just piecemeal one building, one portion at a time. So with Delilah's blessing, that's our plan, is to address it more holistically and get it done.
But for now, you got your coat behind you, Dick.
Hmm?
I said, for now, you got your coat behind you, though.
Layers.
Yes. Anything else on building maintenance? And again, this is one of those things that we could think general service agreements on. The city owns all the buildings we have, whether they're harbors, public works, utilities, whatever. And if we had one building maintenance, we would have some commonality. If we all had the same kind of controls, that type of stuff, we could carry some common stuff, which would really be nice. And again, the process there would be similar to what the vehicle does. You would pay into it either by the square foot or something. And if you have a major capital project that's on your department, to take that money and fund it, and then the building maintenance could help manage that or whatever. But I think that by combining those services, you get a school district does it right now. They got a maintenance facility that takes care of all the schools, regardless of where they're at. And then they can do things like you hire some college kids that come back or younger kids, and they're out doing the brushing, doing the painting, cleaning up around the building, doing all that kind of stuff under the supervision of this group. So you already have a group with some professionals that know what has to be, make plans seasonally, and we might just get a better product. I don't know. I'm just thinking that would be
To
better.
pull on that string a little bit, I will give, Seth is working on a new work order process just for building maintenance. So if I need a light bulb changed or a sidewalk repaired, we can go through a Laserfiche work order process, and that will actually help us track. I mean, we do pretty good charging funds, like if you need to do something at Harbor, they just take care of it out of the Harbor Fund. But if we start with this work order process, we could get to that point where building maintenance responds to harbors. They don't have to call a separate vendor to come do their work. Or, museums is general fund, that's a bad example. But KPU buildings, things like that. So we're gonna start with a work order process hopefully in the next year and start tracking that way. And that's a possibility for us to get to a shared services point where you call building maintenance, we're gonna bill you, Mr. Harbor, we're gonna bill you, Mr. Port, and then we can have the good staff in place to do all that. So that's great. So
Then you can be working with common contractors and all that kind of stuff, so it's not a hit and miss type thing. And if you hire, if you're doing something, it might be more cost efficient rather than do one project, hire an electrician, do this project, and just small project. And you hire an electrician and say, I got this building, and this building, for you to do this in and get it done.
So I thought I was gonna fix all this if I started, that we'll do a energy saving contract, because you could go out for bond for like $10 million, and whatever you save in energy costs will go to paying in that debt. So you replace all your HVAC systems, and you get efficient, but our power is so cheap that it won't work.
It didn't go anywhere.
The math didn't work out.
Yeah. Anything else in that? That moves to the solid waste?
Solid waste, our solid waste special services fund. So solid waste, no proposed rate increases, but as I mentioned at the beginning of our general fund talk, that in FY25, we are going to have to look at possibly a 6% increase. I think we need 23 to 24%, but I'm just throwing it out there. It's not part of this budget. We are looking at a fund balance. Our policy is we should be at 1.2 million. We are requesting a total budget increase of 10.4%. That has a lot to do with capital. The operational, if we take away capital and personnel, is increasing beyond the 5% soft cap. So it's got a little red X because it's 6.9%. That is because we need to increase technical services by 17,500 for some of our permitting issues that are coming up with the landfill. Also, we're seeing an increase of 102,000 in disposal services, and our equipment's getting old. So we've increased that budget by 25,000. So that just comes with equipment maintenance. There are no FTE changes, and then the majority of the increase is coming from the CIP. So that's why we've got a total budget increase of 10.4% is because we've increased the CIP by 35%. We'll go to the next slide. So what we're talking about in CIP, this is all funded through the Solid Waste Service Fund. We are looking at replacing a packer truck. Solid Waste did request a hook truck replacement. I had to cut it because of the fund balances and what was available, so I've asked them to push that to FY26. But the hook truck is needed, but we just don't have the money. So I will let you, that's why I listed it. Most things that I cut, I didn't list in the slides. That one I did because it is needed, but we had to push it to FY26. We have a small increase in cover generation. We always budget about 50,000. We need to increase that to 60. And then for the transfer station floor repair, we're rolling over 90,000 from FY24 and adding another 50 in order to complete that CIP. Lacey, if you'll go to the next slide before we get into discussion. This one just shows you where our revenues are in light blue and our expenses are in dark green. So you'll see in 2021, 22, 23, we were doing pretty good. 24 started to get a little worrisome. So I think we changed some rates, and Michelle mentioned it before. We only changed rates to meet our hauling costs and nothing to do with operations. So now in 25, we're starting to see where revenue is not going to keep up with operations. We're going to have to do some fund reserves. We're still in a healthy position, but we need to address it in calendar year 25.
So one of the things is our contract terminated. We went out, rebid a contract, which came in at a higher cost. So a couple of things. First of all, I think that when we're looking at our rates, we should examine the rates we already have, because I think that our reimbursement to our other hauler in the community is, I think we're giving too much money away into that. And we should review that contract. They're supposed to give us a can count or a house count or customer count or something in regards to what we do that. And I think our reimbursement rate is way too high for the services that we're providing. So I think that should be looked at. The other thing I think we should do is consider charging for commercial cardboard. It's costing us $50 a ton now. And there's no revenue coming in to pay for that, for cardboard. If we were taking it as trash and not recycling, we would get the full rate of it. But I think that once you kill a recycling program, it never comes back. So, but I think that it's fair to consider the biggest user of that is our commercial company. And so they would get a rate difference between disposing of his garbage and as a recycled material. But I think we need to start charging for that. The other thing I'd like to ask is that we look at our Public Works Disposal Division and at account 62002. Salvage and disposal of impounded vehicles. That is being paid out of the solid waste fund, and I think it should be something that would be done out of the general fund and under probably the police department. The solid waste division doesn't touch this at all. All the contracts are negotiated elsewhere. The cars don't come to the landfill. We don't have an area-wide fee or anything to cover any kind of disposal at landfill. So taking it out of this revenue account just doesn't seem right to me.
Yeah, you're right, because the police manage it.
Yeah.
It's in their budget, not in their budget, but it's in their purview to manage the program. But we do take the actual cost out of solid waste. So,
I think we should look at taking that and put it in the different cost center and not charging it to solid waste.
would you like us to bring something?
If you could bring back a budget update to see what that looks like, that'd be great.
We have to have a motion.
You can do the motion when we bring it back.
Okay, oh, perfect. I just
It would be
okay.
Yeah.
Still catching up. Okay.
All right. Anything else? How about capital projects? And just to give you guys a little update on the hook lift, what they're talking about is the larger hook lift truck. We have two of them. One's a smaller one for drop boxes that are about a 12-yard size. But we have one that carries commercial boxes from Walmart, Safeway, the ferry terminal, like that. And we have no other vehicle to haul that. The present truck we have is numerous years old. I don't know what year it is. But do you know, Seth, right offhand?
Yeah.
18 or something like that?
It's 22 years old.
It's 22 years.
It's a spring chicken.
And presently, I think it's kind of healed itself, but I think it has a leaky cylinder sleeve that has been problematic. But so that's why they were looking for the change in this. And it probably wouldn't be, we can use it as a dump truck and other things when it's not just servicing these boxes. So we use it on the landfill for hauling covered material and everything else to get multi-use vehicle. And we can drop a bigger box. We have some boxes that are for the 20-yard boxes that we can deliver to customers with this thing too. So I think the intent would not to be get rid of it. I think they have it in an in-frame rebuild kit for that right now, but they can't take it out of service to put it in. And so that was the attempt here, I think, to manage this. So if that truck was to go down, we'd have to make different arrangements with those customers that were servicing that larger hook truck, just so that the council knows what the situation is there. And if we can move that forward for some unknown reason, that would be good too. And I don't know if there are grants out there for recycled vehicles, multi-use vehicles, that kind of stuff that we may be able to look at. Be worth a try.
Yeah.
And then again, you talk about this floor removal, that's not an easy thing because you're trying to operate it at the same time you're trying to repair it because you can't stop it. They would be able to keep one bay open, but the acidity of garbage is really bad on concrete. Yeah.
Mayor Severson, thank you. So for that project, we do currently have a project out to bid for floor replacement. It's in the 2024 budget. Because of when we had to put the budget packet together, we showed not getting to it and rolling it over. But if bids come in, where we think they will or hope they will, we'll do that out of 2024 budget and then won't have to do it in 2025.
Perfect, thank you. Anything else? Yes.
The packet truck replacement, huh? That's a 2017 truck and you're asking for another one now?
Absolutely.
Yep. That's a long time.
Yeah, these are our frontline hard use trucks. And they take a beating and we need them to be ready to go every day. Answer the bell, go pick up the garbage. So also, there's a long lead time to get the truck. So if we place the order, as soon as we can in 2025, just like with our Bacter and the other large pieces of equipment, it could be quite a while before we see it. So
I'm guessing that's gonna be more than 12 months. We won't extend it later, based on what it's been lately.
yeah, so we put the order in, or we advertise, we get bids, then award, put the vehicle in and then wait, sit and wait and wait and wait. So
normally, Jay, we'd roll these over 5 to 6 years when I was in the landfill business because the terrain that we have to do, we're on hilly country, not like we're driving down a flat highway all the time. So the wear and tear on them through that process is huge. We got to pull the landfill hill. They're a single axle rear end on them, and we're hauling extreme weights in them with the wet garbage that we have, and they got to pull it up that landfill hill. They're done about 5 to 6 years, depending on them. And we've made all kinds of modifications. We've dropped the rear ends in them so low that these trucks will do maybe 40 miles an hour wide open, just trying to make them last longer and longer. And then we buy boxes for them, the Heil boxes, which is a good box. and they have tippers and everything on them, but, these things run, 6 days a week and every day.
Thank you.
And it's something we've been doing all along, because when they start breaking down and you can't get out and service them, people don't stop putting garbage in their can. Anything else? Moving on.
Hop over to our wastewater division. Very proud of the little. Yeah.
Nice.
Found one. For wastewater, we are looking at the wastewater special services fund. Again, no proposed rate increase, but I am letting you know that we are not recommending a 5% this year, but that will be our discussion in FY25 when we get everything loaded into the rate engine. Really, we need about an 18% rate increase in wastewater, but I know that's not feasible. That's not something we can do. But that will be a discussion coming up, just not for this budget. Our fund balance will be at 2.3 million when all is said and done. If we realize all expenses, we should be about 2.8 million. So we're coming short about 500,000 of our projected where we'd like to be. They are asking for a total budget increase of 5.7%. That's total. If we take away the CIP and the personnel, our operational increase is 14.4%, but that's only because we added an additional debt service of $175,000 per year in wastewater. In addition to that, we have minor capital outlay increases. There are no FTE changes, and the CIP increase is about 5.7%. Michelle, can you remind me the debt service, was that Water Street or? Yes. Okay. Thank you. If we go to the next slide, once again, you can see that in years past, the yellow line was outpacing the green line, meaning that our revenue is sufficient for our expenses. But when we get to 2025, those last two bars, our expenses are starting to outpace our revenue. So we can use reserves this year. We're pretty okay, but we will have to address that in FY26. I want to remind you that we have not yet heard from DEC on what the requirement's going to be for possible disinfection of our discharge. That's going to be a lot. What do we estimate for 15 million? 10 million?
Yeah,
Just throwing
that's
that.
that's pending. When I first started back in May, it sounded like the regulations were about to come. They're still not there yet, and that's okay. They'll take the amount of time that they take for us to get them.
We're okay.
I would like to point out in 2023, the wastewater supervisor position was not filled. So it may look like the costs are increasing significantly between 2023 and 2024 estimate or budget and then in 2025. That has to do with the fact that they've had a lot of overtime because of their wastewater supervisor position being unfilled, as well as with the position being unfilled, there are acting duties. So acting duties, overtime, now the position is filled. So you will see that those costs will go back up to where they should be, again, with CBA increases from 2021 to 24, and then expected CBA increases in 2025. So.
Yes, Seth.
And that's a great opportunity to introduce our wastewater supervisor. Jake, would you come up? This is Jake Rogers. He's our new wastewater supervisor. Jake was previously with the water division and joined us and has really made a big impact. So like Michelle indicated, we had a big vacancy. It was empty for quite a while. And so with that meant overtime and just kind of treading water for the division. Now that we have Jake, we're seeing reduced overtime and production, projects that are getting done. They just completed the new belt filter press installation in treatment plant B. That was a big project. Big thank you to Amanda and to Jake for getting that project in on time. Wastewater has a tremendous amount of backlog projects that we need to get completed. So you'll see that our capital improvement plan is pretty aggressive. There's a lot in there. It's just a function of old infrastructure that needs fixed.
Mr. Mayor, council members, if you look at the CIP, really the big one is that Water Street sewer replacement and rehab. We're trying to work on that ahead of the DOT projects, and we are going to have to get a loan. We budgeted for that. We've been expecting it. But really the things that I'm most excited about is getting the dang generators installed. That's the $290,000 project. We've had those sitting here for a few years without getting them at the substations. And so that's a big change, as well as the SCADA controls and upgrades.
Yeah, the SCADA controls are a big thing. That our SCADA system is original to the pump stations, 1980s era, and we really got to get on top of replacing them. So
I've got to say, that's not acceptable as a utility. Like, that really has to get done. That's unacceptable.
So what is the Water Street project that the DOT is going to do?
Oh, sure. So Public Works has a sewer project from, say, Kennedy Street, which is Talbot's, over to the intersection with Schoenbar Road. And then also second segment from the tunnel back to Schoenbar Road. So we have old force main in that section, ductile iron. We just completed a ductile iron slip lining project there at Washington Street. That just got completed. So we have one section of force main that's left. So that's the Water Street project for sewer. We always joke, because I wish we had a sewer street, then we could have a water project on sewer street. And sewer on Water Street. So you guys could do that with naming.
So is part of that project the demolition of the viaduct?
So then the DOT is planning a lot of work on Tongass, including some viaduct demolition and filling back in. So currently, we're in meetings with DOT regularly where they update us on that. The section that's planned to be filled in is at the intersection with Schoenbar Road. That's currently viaduct, and they would open a section of that up, demolish the viaduct, build a retaining wall, and fill it back in with dirt, with gravels.
So it'd be fill from Kennedy Street all the way to Schoenbar Road?
Right now, most of from Kennedy, say, to Pacific Pride is dirt now. It's not until you get to, say, the 49er bar and that intersection with Schoenbar that it starts to be viaduct again. So the fill portion would be from, say, the 49er bar south to where, say, First City Saloon is.
So our getting ready for them we would slip line it from, say, the tunnel to wherever.
Yeah.
Anticipate that, because
It's slip lining it from the tunnel to Hopkins Alley, and then it changes, goes underneath the viaduct. So we wouldn't do that section. It's HDP there already. And then on the other side of that, there's a section from Schoenbar Road to Pump Station 3, which is at Talbot's.
and so that may be impacted with the demolition of the viaduct.
So we hope to, we're trying our best to coordinate our projects and get the wastewater project done first. The DOT currently plans 2027, 2028. So the way we have it structured, we'll be able to get our portion done first. But there, between now and 2029, 2030, there's a large amount of work planned, and it needs it. That road segment is some of the worst.
What I'd hate to do is put a lot of work into it and have them demolish our pipe.
Right, definitely are structuring it to avoid that.
Yeah. Continue. Yes.
But, Seth, is there some way that you're both two contracts? Can't they work together? One contractor, you just put this, dig up, really put it back in and shove our sewer line in at the same time without tearing this thing up twice.
Yeah, so the way that it is very complicated. We're trying to thread a needle here, get the wastewater done first with minimal overlap with the DOT project. But the water line, that's exactly what we have planned, to do the water line at the same time as DOT. So we can minimize disruption and also see that efficiency from doing them together.
We'll do the sewer line first, have a disruption, and then we're gonna go back and disrupt again.
So, good question. We have the funding lined up now for sewer, and that pipe is in really bad shape. I don't think it's wise to wait. I think it's important enough to do that sewer work now. Also, it's a very narrow corridor that right there through Talbot's and that turn. So just having the road work and the water line is going to be a lot of work to cram in that one little narrow section with that much traffic. So I think in this particular case, doing the sewer first, getting it out of the way, will be a benefit.
And you're not gonna do it this summer, right?
No, no,
We're hoping.
not our work.
Jake, anything you want to add since you have a captive audience right now?
Yeah. So I guess we're under wastewater, and one of the things is, listed here is, the overtime wages, not that one, it's the, what happened to the temporary wages? We took those all out, or we're moving them around, and then the overtime wages went from 35,000 budgeted or adopted to amended to 165. That's what happened there.
Yeah, that was for 2024.
Yeah.
And so we did a tremendous amount of wastewater work with a very short staff. And what you're seeing in the 2025 budget is a reduction from 165,000 in 2024 down to a budget amount of 100,000 for 2025. So that's a reduction.
Well, it shows.
Oh, yeah, it's showing positive.
It's showing positive.
So
We missed some quotation marks.
It shows an increase is because it's based on the adopted.
Oh, on the adopted 35.
Yeah.
Okay.
We made the amendment. Okay.
It does look strange.
And I know that's the way we do it, and I looked at this all through, and I made myself all kinds of notes, but when we're looking at the 2025 budget, what weight do you give to the estimate? Because in a lot of cases, we're using far less than what we budgeted. In some cases, we might be using more, but we always use the adopted budget or the amended budget and not the true estimate of what we're actually using, I guess. Does that come into play anything when you're trying to put these numbers together?
We do look at them whenever Michelle and Lacey and I sit and go through and say, is this really reasonable? And that discussion comes up for like overtime, especially temporary wages, even some supplies in some cases. We do look at the estimate, and that's why we keep that column in there, because it does come into play. And Michelle does make recommendations saying, I'll give an example of my own budget. We budget $90,000 a year for grant writing services. We're only going to spend $60,000 this year. And I actually had to convince these two, please leave it alone at $90,000, because the first year we had it, we only spent maybe 15. Now we've spent 60. Now we've got department heads who really want to go after grants. And so I really think we're going to hit that 90 this year. So even I had to kind of argue with the finance director to let me keep my money. But so it does come into play. And we see that where the estimates, you're not going to spend that money and make adjustments. So.
We do, and we evaluate what the departments submit to us. We look at what's actually in the account, and we evaluate the realistic, what's a realistic number. Obviously, we don't want to overinflate because that reduces the reserves that are then available to carry over into 2025. We don't want it to look like we're just saving money. That's not the point. The point is to give you an estimate that looks reasonable. But if somebody's amending their budget then the estimate is more likely going to equal that amended budget, because why would we amend the budget? We had to come to council to increase the overtime for wastewater because they had multiple projects. They had staff that had to be there 24 hours a day. You had to schedule people, so they had multiple issues going on this year that started at the end of last year, really. And then, the belt filter press was part of that project. It was moved up, right? But, so we look at that. We try to, we give the department the benefit of the doubt in some cases, but there are some times where we look at that and reduce the estimate because it just really doesn't look like they're gonna be able to spend that money. Sometimes we get budgets and it's just, it equals what the budget is. And so so we do evaluate that.
Thank you. So one of the things I see in here, we're gearing up for some stuff for the lab and whatnot. Is there an opportunity to combine the labs for water and wastewater?
Yeah, we believe so. We're just about finalized with a new job description. That's a combined water and wastewater lab analyst. From there, there's a lot of work to do, but that's the general direction we're trying to go. Because I think there is some efficiency that can be realized there.
Okay. So did you have a water operator's license?
Yeah, I worked for KPU for 7 years, so I got my 3.3s, and then I worked for the borough for 10 years before that.
So then now you have a wastewater operator
I
license?
got my wastewater certs from when I was working for the borough.
Okay. What's the difference besides the drinkability of the liquid?
So to answer the question, for like the fecals and the, like what we call BACT or what you call like a water sample versus a wastewater sample, is mostly the incubator, but a lot of it is on the regulatory side. They hold the drinking water standards labs to a much higher standard than the wastewater side. So one of the things that we'll have to do is the lab analyst, whenever that position is replaced, will have to either be a certified drinking water lab analyst already, or they're gonna have to go get training in a certified drinking water lab at a minimum of 30 days.
Okay.
That's gonna be one of the requirements. And then the other thing is we have to pay licensings for to the state of Alaska, determining we're basically only gonna do biological and instead of chemical, but biological testing. So then they will pay the bribe. Sorry. Wrong word. But the fee to the state, and then what will happen is every 2 years, we have to be audited by the DEC. They will show up. And it's gonna be a process to get all that taken out. A lot of the stuff will cross over. We have SOPs that are already in place. Most of them should be adequate, but all that has to be reviewed by the state. It's a much more thorough thing. So there's probably, I would have to say at least a year's worth of work to probably get everything nailed down before we're even ready to submit things to the state. First, we have to find the correct applicant, which with a lab analyst is someone that's, I will tell you right now, I'm not a lab analyst. I'm not that person. That's a very specific personality. Yeah, that's
Well,
right.
I see it working though, if we could get there.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, and then how about water operator and a wastewater operator? You have both licenses, right? Or you have?
I still have my water certs. I
Yeah,
have 10
so what's the difference? You're both working with pipes in the ground. You're both.
So One's more chemical based, the other one's more biological based, on the treatment side. They're technically both related to, they're both governed by the same department from the state. They have the Department of Operations or Environmental Conservation. They're the ones that govern the licenses. A lot of the requirements are exactly the same. So you'll have like your CEUs, a lot of that will cross over unless it's drinking water core specific. The other thing, I mean, a lot of the work in the industry, and it doesn't matter whether it's water or wastewater, is site specific. So like, I will tell you right now, you know, I ran the Burroughs plant for 10 years. Coming over, I still required training on, you know, certain procedures and policies and certain equipment. Like I ran, you know, a chlorinator system, but I didn't run at the Burrough, but I didn't run on-site generation, so that required training. I didn't do UV. Also, for example, like they have secondary treatment SBR plant over there. Pretty technical facility actually, and then you come to the wastewater side here and it's primary, which is
Pretty basic.
it's pretty
Simple.
basic treatment, but the sheer volume and some of the things that we have to do to stay in compliance with the permit that we already have are very requires a lot of in-house testing and things to stay on top of it, because one oops could push our fecal colonies, which, just so you know, current limits are 100,000 per month. You know, there's a daily maximum, but we never hit that because the goal is 100,000 monthly average. So if we hit like 125, we have to start taking more samples to get the average down. So we have to do a lot of in-house testing to make sure that, hey, when I take this sample, we're not going to violate. So there's things that we have to do. So right now we're averaging about 500,000 colonies. I have also extensively looked over the preliminary permits for Petersburg, Wrangell, and Sitka. I can tell you right now, we're going to go from 100,000 colonies to 200 average, which is what the Clean Water Act specifies.
Big drop.
Big drop. And there will be other part of the increases for lab testing. We're going to be required to do ammonia. Right now, we don't have to do that. They're going to be a wet test that'll also have to be sent out to another lab. That's something that goes to a special lab. We'll send it off to a third party, and then they'll send it off to probably one of 4 or 5 labs in the United States that are certified to do that test. That'll probably cost, I don't even want to guess, thousands of dollars, if not tens of thousands of dollars for that test.
Probably enough.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah,
It's gonna be a challenge.
It is. And I think there's, what we're looking at today is where we're at, but when we're looking at the future, it's gonna be more expensive to do wastewater work. I just see it coming. Regulations would drive us all our costs.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I love it when a guy just wants to talk about what he does, right?
It's actually interesting.
Anything else in the operational budget for wastewater? Capital. So in the capital part, they talked about the public art, and there's gonna be something come back probably on that. And it's not that we don't like the arts, I think, but for me, if we're spending $20 million out of reserve, maybe something that we don't need to be spending on. Just a thought.
And I can say you can strike that from a capital budget. You don't have to change the policy if you don't want to, but you can always take it out and say, do not make this 1% part of the project.
I will point out on the C1 page, the capital projects that then resulted in the 1% public art amounted to a total of $82,893 across all funds. So the general fund, $2,500.
That's not much.
Public Works Sales Tax Fund, $59,000. And that isn't money that is, it is just identified as a balance. So that in the event that that a committee is established and decides to promote this public art and then decide on a project that they think qualifies, that those funds then would be available and you're not kind of searching for them. Just
Thank you.
information.
Yeah, I like it. Anything else? Okay.
That is Public Works.
Oh, I know. How many customers do we have? How many service? I mean, what do we?
Yeah, so I did respond back, to pose that question you made earlier today, that we have, 2,800 residential and then 426.
So many numbers.
485 business customers.
So less than 3,500 customers to pay for all the wastewater work that we have to do. And part of that, of course, is servicing the cruise industry when we have a large, so when we have these conversations about how we're gonna use some of those monies, wastewater is definitely one of those things, plant-wide, mainstream-wise, that we could probably dedicate some of that to. I would certainly like to look at that. The other thing, and it'll come up under when we start talking utility budget, but we propose to put in water meters, and for commercial customers, depending on how you audit them, a percentage of their wastewater bill would be based on the amount of water they use, depending on the type of operation, you know. And so I've been a little frustrated that we haven't got there yet. So we'll bring that up under the utilities when we discuss that, but I think that there's a rate that can be tied to that in the commercial end of things.
And to pull on that thread, I did ask John for an implementation plan to finish that project by next year.
Mhm.
And so I'll follow up with him on, he gave me a longer timeline than what I want, so.
Yeah, no,
To get it
we've
done.
been at this since 2019.
No, it's not acceptable at this point.
Thank you. Is that all we have for tonight? We've got one more.
No. Well, you want to go into Harbor's, but nobody's here.
No, it is 9:30. I think it's time.
Or at the manager's office, I'm here. The council's here.
Yes. Yes. So, with that, there is a motion that we have to make after the general discussions. A motion to postpone consideration of resolution number 252945.
Your Honor,
Yes.
I move the city council postpone consideration of the draft 2025 general government operating and capital budget until Monday, December 2nd, 2024.
Second.
Moved and second. That one we can vote on, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Would you please call the roll?
Kistler,
Yes.
Zingy,
Yes.
Matani.
Yes.
Flora,
Yes.
Gas.
Yes.
And I'll just open it up. Does anybody have any comments at this particular point?
See you later.
Do I have a motion for adjournment?
Adjourn.
Yeah, we're, yeah.
How do we?
Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, we stand adjourned.
So our next meeting is December 2nd, 6:30. That's a Monday.